Welcome back to the Car Guys channel. We are going to be going over a Victor deck tech here today, and I am joined with Michael Metallo, also known as Metal Online on Discord. You might have seen him on there. Been playing Victor for a while, as have I. I am very fond of this hero, and we're just going to get a little insight from you and kind of ask first off, what made you bring Victor to Canadian Nationals?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of take you through a bit of a journey on what heroes I played in the past.
Sure.
So I actually started the game out as Guardian as Bravo, back around the Dynasty era, and around last year, around when Bright Lights released, I started playing more Bolton after Icelander LL'd. And I
Hmm.
was playing Bolton up until I played Bolton for the Pro Tour, and kind of I was playing him up until MST released. And so for the Nationals, I kind of felt like Bolton was in a pretty bad spot, just because you basically have no way to actually outrace and Zen has cards that kind of shut you down if they can tell you're on the combo plan, for example, like Warmonger's Diplomacy. And if you're just trying to race them with Raiden, it's not going to go well for you. Basically, they just have way more numbers than you can deal with. So I was kind of between maybe KO going Zen myself or going Victor as my initial three options for what I thought would be good. And basically, up until the a few days before the Nats, actually, I was practicing a lot of KO because I felt he had like a decent win rate into the rest of the field, and also you can potentially out aggro Zen. But the reason I kind of decided I didn't want to play KO is because first of all, the matchup between Zen kind of felt a bit of a coin flip. I'm gonna say, depending on who goes second, that actually changes the win rate quite a bit, from my understanding. And also, some of the Zen decks were being better teched into aggro mirrors, for example, with the prevalence of
Right.
Zephyr Needles, which
Right.
actually won the U.S. Nationals. So
Yeah,
I
we've been
actually,
seeing that a lot. Hmm.
yeah. So I decided to play Victor, and my first ever actual CC game on Victor was 3 days before Nats.
Really?
Now, the reason I felt I could bring Victor to Nats like with a degree of confidence is because I played like hundreds and hundreds of games on Bravo
Sure.
previously, and
Sure.
I've even played games on Betsy back when people were still trying to figure her out, and then I just gave up basically.
Sure.
So I was like,
Yeah.
well, if I have a lot of Guardian experience, I can hopefully transfer that into the matchups that I'm going to see, and hopefully I'll be able to navigate my way well enough, which I did for most of the weekend.
Yeah. Well, that's good. So you said that you haven't played Victor until like 3 days before Nationals, right? So how did you like
Yeah,
land on a list? Do you have like a testing group that you're known to play with or something that you kind of like took inspiration from? Or you just kind of like saw a list online you thought was pretty cool and then tweaked it the way that you wanted to, being a Guardian veteran?
yeah. So initially, I actually was testing with your list that was posted.
Nice.
The
Nice.
I believe it was the Castomes list that was posted on
Yeah. Yeah.
the Victor Discord,
Right.
and that list was working okay for me. I just felt like it could have been optimized a bit more for the Zen meta specifically,
Sure.
and maybe giving up on some matchups that I felt are pretty much unwinnable. Like for example, I think Kano is pretty unwinnable.
Right.
That's why, as we'll see later in the list, I didn't even bother to bring any Arcane Barrier. I was like, if I face a Kano in the Canadian Nationals, I'll just give them a win.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I respect all the Kano Canadian players to know what they're doing. So yeah, there's basically no point. That's what we call a go to lunch matchup.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
That's why,
Exactly.
yeah. So I
Okay.
was testing a few games with the Castones list on Wednesday, mostly against new. I did like maybe I think like 5 or 6 games. I was like, okay, this feels okay. But then afterwards, like basically, so I was on that list until the night before Nats.
Mm.
Around like 9 p.m. after the Super Armory, I got on a call with some of my friends in one of my testing groups. So I'm part of a testing group called Broken Bobble,
Okay.
and it's kind of just a few Canadian players who are trying to have high performance at events basically. And so I got on a
Sure.
call with a few guys, uh, mainly Mark Boothroyd, Frank Boothroyd, and Nicola Marco, and they kind of gave me their victor list basically, and they basically gave me the rationale for why certain cards are potentially bait, with the release of Castone's. I'm saying Castone's, but that's go
Yeah,
visit the
yeah,
Gold
yeah.
Main Estate.
Visit Goldmain
Yeah,
Estate for anybody who's not
that's what it's
familiar.
affectionately referred to in the Fab
Right,
community.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they
So
explained to me that. Oh, sorry. You
no,
gonna
you're
say
good.
something?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so they were basically explaining to me, Nicola especially. He's like, "Well, Unothos is a great card, right? I don't think anyone's gonna dispute that. Unothos has a lot of success in the game's history, especially with specific attacks like Zealous Belting and Outmuscle. You get
Mm,
your 3 card 11, 3 card 12. That's all nice and dandy and all that stuff. But the main reason to run mainly Titan's Fist is you can run the Shield or Magus,
mhm,
which if
mhm.
you look at the value that it gives over the game now with because of the Gold Main Estate, it's basically 6 value over the course of the game, which is pretty insane for an offhand.
Right.
Like I
Yep.
think we haven't seen a shield give this much value since, well, obviously like Rampart gives pretty good value in certain matchups, but I
Sure.
think it's now almost comparable to how good Stalagmite was in Oldhim with regards to what it does for the hero and how it kind of shifts certain matchups, is all I'm going to talk about sooner. So
Right.
yeah, the only matchup where I actually really missed the Nothos is, well, obviously Kano, but that matchup's unwinnable anyways, and
Mhm.
Enigma.
Right.
Because Enigma you can run Anothos plus Fan Brace, which kind of gives you a decent plan to the ward. But the reason I ended up cutting it is because if you just run the normal gloves and the shield, you just have a lot more life, which can actually be pretty relevant in some Enigma matchups where you're just trying to basically absorb a ton of damage in order to hopefully clear the board and swing back. And also, it just felt like there's certain Enigma decks that you're just never beating as Victor, like if they're on a very heavy aura plan.
Mm,
But there's some that I think are not even that bad if you're just on Titan's Fist, like value plan with cast domes. Like
right.
for example, the Enigma decks that are beating Zen have a very heavy Phantasm plan,
Right.
and they basically
Yep.
can't cut those attacks. So otherwise, they just don't have a functional deck at that point. And Victor is, I think, not bad into those decks at all, or just
Yeah,
cards in
exactly.
general.
With the shield, I 100% agree. I
Yeah,
think it
with the
was the
shield.
Team Ascent list. That was kind of, well, obviously U.S. Nationals was first, so I'm sure other people had figured this stuff out beforehand as well. But that was a very attack action heavy list that was trying to present disruption, as you were saying, which is better inherently for Guardian. The worst ones are going to be the ones that play like 10,000 visits and trying to turbo out like big mirror guys and hit you a bunch of times. But I remember hearing you one time saying that you got hit like 3 times with
Yeah,
manifestations and you still
yeah,
won the game, which is nuts. It's nuts. We'll talk
yeah.
about that in
My
just a second.
oh
So
sorry.
what were you going to say?
I say that's my very first game of the Swiss. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a perfect segue. So we're going to look at this here. So on the screen, you guys can see the top 8 situation that Michael had to kind of navigate here. It's just a sea of Zens. Just a sea of Zens. But we're going to go over your tournament recap. So the first matchup that you played was Enigma, right? So if we can just go through your matchups and kind of like how they played out in a vague sense, and then we'll continue on. We'll talk about a deck walkthrough. We'll transition the screen to that, and then your good and bad matchups, and then the matchups in general, and talk about the game plans and kind of the overall strategy. Okay, sound good?
Okay. Yeah, sounds
All right,
good.
all right. Take it away.
So my first 3 matchups in Swiss, which I went 3-0 in, I guess that's a bit of a spoiler, were Enigma,
Mm,
Prism, and the original Dash. So my Enigma matchup, as we kind of alluded to earlier, I actually I actually survived a 5 counter mirror guy swinging at me 3 times that game. And
That's
basically
so
the life
crazy.
total was, I think it was 40-20 win at point with me being at 40. My opponent plays this mirror guy. They use uphold on it. They start swinging at me. They also played a Rage Spectre that turn too.
Mm,
And after 3 turns of that, it was one. The life total was 121. But the first time they actually swung the mirror guy at me, my hand was, I believe, Rouse the Ancients. I think a Clash of Might. It might have been 2 Clash of Mights actually, and an Enlightened Strike.
mm,
So I was like, "Wow, I really have to swing this Rouse the Ancients. Otherwise, if I'm not going to pressure his hand, then I'm just never going to clear this mirror guy." So I had a few gold up, so I started cracking gold until I basically drew a hand that was playable with Rouse, and I believe I drew into an Lightning Strike 2. So I sent Rouse
mm.
the Ancient, Lightning Strike for 7, and then I arsenaled the Zealous Belting to keep the pressure on for the next turn. and eventually I was able to actually clear the Mega Eye, and that was kind of the turning point because they just, as we talked about earlier, they were on this deck that was basically built to beat Zen. So they just kept
Sure.
drawing Phantasm attacks and like 2 for 6s, which if you're playing a 2 for 6 against Victor, you're very happy just slamming like a flash card in front of that or two cards and
Exactly.
coming back for above rate damage compared to what they can dish out. So yeah, my
Right.
opponent sadly just wasn't able to. I guess not sadly for me, just wasn't able to find a way to close out the game, even though they managed to get basically a huge life lead.
Yeah. I've had
Yeah.
experiences like that even recently where I think the game was 25-7, same style Enigma, right? And I was able to turn the corner, and once you get to that portion, you can kind of control their board. It's not hopeless like some people think it is. But the next matchup was Zen? No.
Was No, it was
Oh,
Prism.
Prism, that's right.
Yeah. So I was against the Prism, and my plan was this is the just to give you some context. This is like the first time I ever played against the Prism on Victor because, as
Sure.
I mentioned, I was very new on the hero, but I played against it a lot on Bravo before, so I'm kind of familiar with like the Guardian plan. And essentially, I was just clearing their big threatening auras, like Genesis,
Mhm.
um, passing Mirage. I was kind of leaving Pierce Reality, and while doing so, I was also kind of just swinging damage at them when they had an off turn where they had to just um, swing a herald at me basically.
Right.
And because they didn't draw a live, so that matchup is pretty different depending on if they draw a library early or not. If they draw a library, it can be a pretty, or draw a library early enough, it can be pretty hard to navigate
Mhm.
through
For sure.
their huge hands basically. But because they weren't able to see it in like the top, I think like 20-ish cards of their deck, I was just able to pressure their life enough where it didn't matter basically at that point. And I have time skippers in my list, so
Mhm.
I was basically always able to break the loop they tried to present it on me. At one point, I arsenaled a rousing agents just in case they were going to try to go off of me. Because with rousing agents, what you can actually do is you can break their loop of arc lights, erudition, and rebirth. Essentially, with just using two blues and rousing agents, because you can actually swing rousing agents at Genesis,
Right.
not Genesis, rousing agents at Arclight to break the specter on that,
Right. Yep.
which is pretty cool interaction.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
anything that costs 3 or less, you can do that with that in the Arsenal
yeah,
situation. But because it's a 0, people don't think about that, which is interesting.
yeah. That's actually one of my favorite plays to do as Bolton. As I mentioned before, I like to play a lot of Bolton.
Right.
I just like full block Prism with my hand, and then when they play an aura, I'll just swing Raiden at it and pop it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
Yeah.
it's pretty funny. Yeah, with you're basically going plus value for no cards there. And
So
so my third matchup, I played into a Dash Inventor, and they were on a hybrid plan, but they presented Induction Chamber as the first item, which makes sense, obviously.
right.
And they were basically just trying to set up items on me and come back for a big swing turn. By items, I mean like Teklo Pounder and Teklo Core. But I was
Okay,
just
so
able to
no
pressure
pistol
them,
package, it sounds like.
no pistol package. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I think what they did was the only viable way you can win that matchup if you're on that game plan. But unfortunately, I think it's a it's a pretty favored matchup for Victor as we'll go in later, just because now I think even if they're on full pistol package, I'm not even sure that's going to be a viable plan against the Victor list because of cast stones, and you're just able to go over
Right.
wherever they can block.
Yeah, the block
Yeah. So
cards
that
are
game,
absolutely insane
yeah,
against Dash.
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. You just get a ton of gold, and you're able to come in with like 8 might tokens at some point,
Yeah, yeah,
and
it's
it's like,
crazy. It's crazy.
yeah, they can't block. Yeah,
Yeah, even then, I played Victor at PT, and I was testing into the dashes. I played against Merrick at the mid max event, and I was just just capitalizing off of all the block cards and then sending like go again attack after go again attack. And again, this was before cast homes was even a thing. So the fact that I was still feeling like very favored into a pistol focused deck that's playing unmovable, sink below, fate foreseen, all that kind of stuff, and still getting there is, yeah, it's not looking good for Dash, at least in this matchup. So congratulations on your 3-0. So next
yeah. Thank you.
you went into your limited, and we can talk briefly about that if you'd like.
Yeah. So my first limited pod, I was in the highest seated table, as you as you can imagine.
Sure.
I think there was like 2 tables I could have been at. Um, so I was being so my seat was Probably I was probably Enigma, but I think it could be an argument for new as well. And I think pack one, pick one. I pick one a oh yeah, I pack one, pick one, a tune with cosmic vibrations.
Yep.
So I just felt
Yep.
that had a pretty good high roll potential,
You just
and
love
I
the
ended up
clash. You have
passing.
to
I think
clash more.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll get into that too.
Sure.
I actually ended up passing. I think like a red untamed and red pouncing key my pack one, and I kept
Yeah.
seeing like
Those are
these
big.
red ninja cards that were being passed to me. So I'm like, okay, my seat's probably not ninja, because what ended up happening is what I thought would happen. There ended up being a three ninja train
Mm.
directly
Mhm.
to my left. Yeah, so I did not want to basically be part of that train. So I was like, okay, my seat is either new or Enigma, and pack one there was a lot of kind of well, if you drafted MST a lot, you know that sometimes these Enigma packs are just not it. You see a lot of like yellow and blue no blocks,
Right.
and what might be playable cards in like other classes because they block for three, or even in Zen, they're not like that. Like some Zen yellows are not even that bad to play, like Untamed, for example. But Enigma, the yellows and blues that don't block are pretty rough sometimes. So what I thought was happening was, oh, maybe it's just like a weak Enigma pack because that can happen sometimes, where it's just like such a weak Enigma pack or Enigma packs, I should say, for pack one that their Enigma actually ends up being underpicked.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
that's why I chose to be Enigma that pod, and I ended up being one of three. And I actually ended up beating both other Enigmas that pod, partially due to luck, partially due to how my deck was constructed. I
Okay.
recognized later on that I was probably not in like the best Enigma seat. There was Enigma directly to my right, actually. So what I ended up doing was I ended up kind of going a bit of wet Enigma, as I like to call it, which is
Yeah.
basically you draft a few pathway travels, and I had
Okay.
I
Yep.
believe I
Yep.
had two droplets and one second tenant of I think it's tied, the one that gets plus two, right? The second tenant of
I
tied.
believe so.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
So what you can basically do with that is you can set up pretty good like swing turns where you can just pressure a lot of damage while also transcending. Yeah,
Yep.
and I kind of want to give like a funny, I guess a funny story based off like my my draft performance in that pod.
Mm.
So my one draft lost that pod was because of cosmic vibrations missing, and it also missed my first game too. So I actually
Jeez.
went over 2 on mixes for that. So I was kind of joking how I also lost Clash in limited as well.
Yeah.
Because it's
Yeah.
kind of like Clash. It's kind of like a pseudo Clash, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Because they
think
have to reveal the blue.
yeah, I think yeah, you have to reveal a blue, yeah.
Right.
But it obviously not the same, but it's like it's probably as close as you can get without actually being Clash in the
Yeah.
draft environment.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a reveal on
So
the opponent's deck. Is
yeah.
to clarify. Right. So uh, that and the clash cards are the only cards in the game that actually like force you to flip a card. So it's just funny that like you're playing Victor and then you get into draft and you're like, oh, my pack one pick one is the clash card of the set, which is awesome. I love
Yeah,
that.
that was pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it ended up being probably one of my worst pick ones ever, just because it cost me the
Sure.
game. But honestly,
Yeah.
I probably wasn't gonna throw that pod anyways, just because of I think there was like some pretty good Zen decks in that pod,
Mm-hmm.
and I believe a
Mm-hmm.
Zen deck made it to the finals. So I don't think I was probably gonna win that matchup. But yeah, I probably would have won my second game if it hits. But the first game it missed, and I still ended up winning anyways.
Yep. Well, good deal. So you
Yeah.
2-1. And then day two, you go through and you draft Enigma again, if I remember correctly.
Oh yeah. So this draft is also day one, by the way. They made
Oh,
us
okay.
do 3CC and then two drafts back to back. Yeah.
Huh.
So
Okay.
I believe I pack one picked one. What did I pack one pick one here? I think there was either a I think it was probably a red battle from Bastion actually. Yeah, if I remember correctly.
Okay. Yeah. Good pack one
Yeah.
pick one for sure.
Yeah, it is a good pack one pick one. Yeah. A pack with like a foil waxing specter. So I was like, well, if there's a way I'm gonna go through this pod,
Right.
it's probably with these waxing specters. And my deck ended up having at the end, I was one of two enigmas. I ended up having, I think, like three waxing specters red. I had I think I had three equipment slots. I never actually saw playable eggs, but I had like Truth Retold, um, the Skyhold arms and or Sky Body chest piece,
Hmm.
and I think I had like five manifestations or something, like two reds, two yellows, and a blue. So my deck was pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
So you ended up VOing that pod, yeah.
okay, and your matchups just briefly were
Oh, in that pod,
yeah, yeah.
I think I faced one of each hero actually. I faced an Enigma,
Okay, yeah.
and then a new, and then a Zen.
So it
Yeah,
sounds like it was a balanced pod for the most part. It wasn't like
yeah. I think
a
it was just
ninja
like two.
train or anything like you had on the first one.
Yeah, I think it was just like 2 through 3 standard pod. I just happened to be probably like the best seed based off what was seen for Enigma
Right,
3-0, but my deck was definitely pretty good. Like it was definitely better than my first pod.
right.
Yeah,
Having a little bit of delay, but we're still good to go. So yeah, just a connection thing. But so you 3-0 this pod, and you're looking great going into the CC rounds, right? So
yeah,
what I want to ask about the limited side though is you played Enigma both times. Is that something of just a preference in play style, or is it you were just playing your seat? Like, what's the deal there? Because you said your pack one pick one was
yeah,
Battlefield Bastion. You play any deck at that point, right? So
yeah.
is
Well, as I said, I was past like a red waxing specter.
sure,
So um, I don't want to say like I forced did the most in that format for sure.
sure,
Just because I'm not really like a I wasn't really a huge fan of new. Like personally, I just felt it really hard to actually 3-0 with the new deck because a
sure,
lot of
sure,
times, like your pick the pieces and stuff, they still line up against Enigma, and you have to like get some decent banishes against the Zen, for example, for your transcend to actually matter. Otherwise, if they just don't block with their blues, your transcend doesn't really do anything,
right,
or if you don't have a way to banish from the graveyard, right?
right,
Yeah. So I would say like new is probably my least favorite deck to draft.
mm,
I know some people have had good success with it in draft, but it's just for me personally. And the reason I probably have like a lesser preference towards Zen, even though I think he's probably like the easiest to pilot, is just because I think people inherently lean towards drafting Zen
sure,
because I think people know what happened when you actually get a 2 of Zen pod. It's pretty rough for the rest of the pod. I
right,
think 2 of Zen is the probably like the best 2 of in the format. Yeah.
sure, sure. Well, good deal. So
Yeah, I didn't like Hard Force, but my preference is definitely towards Enigma personally.
yeah, yeah. And there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of a preference, but as long as you can play your seat, you're always good. So we've been talking a lot about limited. We're gonna switch back gears to the Victor because that's the name of the video, right? So we're back
Yeah.
to the CC rounds, and you have three more, and we won't spoil your record unless we already have. Um, and yeah, we'll just talk about each of those matchups again. And I know you had a repeat here and there. So what was your next round?
Yeah, so going into day 2, I actually only had to, am I allowed to say my record or no? Because we kind of
Huh?
talked about
Yeah,
it.
yeah. Go for it.
Anyways, I only needed, actually 1 win to get top 8,
Sure, sure.
basically, just based off where my seating was, because I think a few X3s made it in, and, like, obviously me being one of the highest X3s seeded, I just need to win 1 game basically to be top 8. So
Right.
round, not round 1, I guess round 10 or the first round of day 2, I'm against Daniel Dresler on new. And if you're familiar with Daniel Dresler, he's one of the best assassin players in the country.
Nice,
So
nice.
I was already like, okay, I know this is a rough matchup because this is one of the matchups I actually tested before going into the tournament.
Hmm.
Um, and it was a pretty close game actually. I think there was like I was actually able to pressure him quite a bit with the go again attacks, and muscle was okay too. Lane strike was okay. Zealous belting was okay. I think
Yep.
he had some pretty good hands line up with some of his Justinics, and also there was one very unfortunate hand I had where he played Bonds of Agony against me, and I had two blues with the same name. So when you're in
Ah,
that
that's
spot, it's
rough.
pretty rough always.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think my hand was I think like two thunks, another blue I forget which one, and an enlightened strike, and
Mm.
I think I had a few my tokens up. Yeah, because I think I played Cast Homes the turn before. I'm not 100% sure. But yeah. So anyways, I just basically wanted to go no blocks, but in that spot I wasn't able to because if you have multiples, you're basically forced to blocking. Um, bonds in agony, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, so
So,
unfortunately, that was probably one of the big spring turns in the game because I had a decent life lead up until that point.
mm,
So yeah, he was able to win that game,
okay.
even though it was fairly close at the end. I think I had him at I think 2 HP, and then in my next game, I was against a Dash.
Yep.
Um, this is kind of a repeat of my first game. I think my so I actually I went second that game. I think yeah, and my hand was like I think it was like it was a blue, two flash cards, and a lightning strike.
Mm,
So I think it was a lightning strike. Yeah. So I just I swung Titan's Fist. I think I arsenaled the lightning strike, and I just kept the two flash cards. Because what I
yep.
know is gonna happen is when he swings into me, I'm just gonna start getting a ton of gold and setting up that cast was for a ton of mites, like I said earlier in the
Right.
video. And I ended up having one turn where I went rouse the ancients into weakest link, and I pummeled the weakest link, and he had to basically discard two cards. He discarded a Teklo core. So yeah, that was
That's awesome.
definitely a huge
That's
swing
awesome.
turn. Yeah, I think I ended up closing the game with like 8 might tokens, and I actually revealed a golden off the top.
Nice.
So
Just high rolling
he
them.
just conceded at that point. Yeah,
That's
he
awesome.
conceded because I
That's
had
awesome.
face up 18 overpower for the next turn. He was only at 12 life.
God.
But yeah,
This is
so
why Victor is
it's a
so
pretty rough
fun.
matchup.
Victor is
Yeah,
so
yeah, it
fun
was
because of this, like, just big dumb numbers. You're sending pulverized numbers, and then, but you're doing it with two cards. It's crazy. So good. Okay, so match three.
yeah,
You're locked for top
yeah.
eight at this point,
So
so you're good
yeah,
to
I'm
go.
locked for top 8.
Yep.
So I played against a Zen, and this so actually the very first game I ever played against Zen on Victor was I think like 20 minutes before the first game of this day. But I'm pretty familiar with how
Jeez,
Zen plays. I'm pretty familiar with how Guardian plays. I played like Guardian into Ninja before, like Katsu when I was on Bravo. So I'm like, okay, I just trying to like disrupt them, value block, and
that's
that game went pretty
confidence
much
right
how you
there,
expect.
for
What do you
sure.
say?
I said that's confidence right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that game went pretty much how I expected most of my games to
Sure,
go into
sure.
Zen. I just win my clashes. I send disruption. It's like a good time for me, not a good time for my opponent. Yeah. So from there, I think I was 10-2 going into top 8 as the third seed overall.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So as you can see on the screen, we have the top eight breakdown for the Canadian Nationals. There's one new Zen, six Zen, and then we have Michael here. I'm Victor, repping our boy. So, just a sea of Zen. Honestly, like this feels pretty decent, but this was before the ban, and it can do some crazy damage numbers just out of nowhere. If you haven't seen Zen, where have you been? Are you living under a rock? But they do this thing where they block with their armor, and then they have a 7 card hand, and it's like actually nuts. So, talking about your top eight, you are paired into Tark Patel, right? And
Yeah.
enlighten us how that game goes.
Yeah. So obviously, Tarek's a very good player. So even though I know it's a favored matchup, I'm still kind of, a little uneasy. Because obviously, Zen can just draw the nuts, and even as Victor at some points, like you're basically done.
Right.
So I was falling a little bit behind. I think I'm not sure if I lost an early clash. I think I might have, but at one point I sent an amnesia with a might token up for 7 damage,
Mm.
and he just full fridged it. And from there he had a huge pivot turn, basically using basically like I guess it's like a 6 card hand, right? With the tiger and stuff and arsenal plus
With
arsenal.
Arsenal, they get the
So from there,
Tiger, and they also
yeah,
get the
get the
Transcend
chi,
card from
right?
the yeah from Traverse the Universe.
Yeah.
Yep, or
So
Chi. Yeah,
I
you're
took a
right.
ton of damage, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with that game on stream, but I had a pretty big life deficit,
Mm,
and at one point in the game, I have a pummel and arsenal, and my hand is Clash of Mites, Golden Sun, pummel, and another blue.
mm,
So I was actually debating between sending Clash of Might and 2 pummels or Golden Sun plus 1 pummel.
mm,
And I ended up going Clash of Might 2 pummels because I just thought, it's probably a little more disruptive. And it ended up being a
right,
really good play because I basically locked him up from doing damage the rest of the game. And my choke slams just lined up really good with his Art of Wars, and I was able to close it out from there.
right. Yeah, in
Yeah.
general, presenting disruption and getting as many cards out of your opponent's hand when it's an
Yeah,
aggro matchup style like that is the correct line. So definitely experience shows there. So congratulations on that win. Then you play against yet another Zen, and
yeah.
unfortunately we know how this one ends. But yeah, tell us kind of what went wrong. I guess like obviously you played very well, but Zen does Zen things, right? So
Yeah. So I basically lost every single early clash. Like I lost the
right.
Trounce, I lost the Clash of Might, and I drew two 4 red hands. So one of my hands, I basically had to take way more damage than I should have taken, just
Mm,
to basically pitch 2 reds to swing weakest link. Because the thing about Zen is, if you're not actually able to disrupt them, usually it's worth it to disrupt them instead of just blocking.
right.
Yeah, because you're just gonna have a worse time on the clapback basically from their end. So yeah, basically
Yep.
whatever could have gone wrong in this game kind of went wrong. I had very red heavy. I had 2 4 red hands, like I said, so I just was not able to pressure effectively using stuff like tunicking into pummel because I just didn't have the resources for that, and I had to pitch 2 reds to just play my disruption card, which obviously is not ideal. I'm leaking more damage than I should have to leak. And at the very end of the game, I'm not sure, is this picture on the screen? I'm not sure. The
Yeah. So we have the Canadian victor and then the top 8 breakout
Yeah,
here that I'm sharing. Yeah.
yeah. So I ended up kind of doing the Canadian victor play here, where we clashed, and I reveal the Golden Sun, and he reveals Art of War, and I choose to reroll a clash and bottom is Art of War. So I just want to give some context. Like obviously that's an illegal play,
Right. Yeah.
but I just had very little sleep going into this day. Like I think I had like 4 hours of sleep the night before, and the Friday I also got not that much sleep because I was pretty worried about my deck list and stuff. And I was very new to Victor, so I feel like this is a mistake a lot of people are new to Victor make.
I've
So I was
made
like,
this
oh yeah,
mistake
I have
before, so don't feel bad.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah I like oh I have a ton of guarding experience. How hard can it be to find with
Exactly.
Victor? And this
Exactly.
it ended up biting me pretty bad here. So I took an IP2 because I forgot you couldn't reroll the win unfortunately,
Mm.
and I ended up losing the game from there. Even though I did actually end up drawing like some playable hands after that. Like I actually won a trounce, which is
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is nice, but at that point it was just too late. Yeah,
Right. Yeah, I've made that exact same play line. Fortunately, it wasn't in a top 8 for me, so sorry about that. But I've been playing against like a KO or something that we do a clash. They reveal Blood Rush Bellow, and I reveal whatever card, and I win. And I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna re-roll that Blood Rush Bellow to the bottom of your deck because that card kills me, right? And obviously, you can't do that. But well,
yeah,
all in
yeah.
all, you did fantastic. Everybody was rooting for you. Love to see representation for Victor at a bigger event like this. We got some really popular names here on this top 8. So, two that jump out to me immediately, not to discount anybody else who did well, because they did great, is Tarek Patel and Yuki Lee Bender. We've seen them in top 8s all over the place. So, you are tangoing with the best of them, for sure.
Yeah. Well, it's a very stacked top 8.
Absolutely.
I just want to shout out my friend Sunny who actually won the events.
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Um, I do testing with him, and I think he definitely probably deserved the win out of everyone basically in his top 8 because he's been repping Ninja I know for years now.
sure.
And when this set dropped and like Zen was really good, I basically knew it was kind of like his time to shine,
Yeah,
especially.
yeah.
So if I was gonna lose, I'm happy I lost to him.
Yeah, well, that's a good way to look at it. Josh Lau, for instance, when the heavy hitters came out and we knew Warrior was good, it was like, all right, it's Josh's time. And then he top 8's Pro Tour. So I get it. I love the sentiment, and I'm right there with you. Okay. So we are going to transition. We are actually going to show the deck. I know everybody's probably just like chomping at the bits to actually see this. So here is the list. I copied this over, but of course this is your list. Save Me Cast Homes. I like the name. Very strong. So
Yeah.
one moment. Okay. So yeah, we're going to talk about the list. Just do a deck walkthrough. So you just let me know how you want to transition this. Basically, you see a lot of stock cards here, but we'll kind of talk about like the individual choices that you made, like the Clash of Might, for instance, the number of your disruptive sideboard cards, right? And kind of go through that.
Yeah. So I kind of want to preface this by saying credit for this list basically goes to mostly Mark Boothroyd, Frank Boothroyd, and Nicola Marco
Yep.
for kind of getting me on this list. I was looking for one that I felt had good ratios, and so I guess I'll kind of give some I guess I'll kind of say like individual card choices that are different from stock breaker lists.
Mm,
So Clash of Might being one that you mentioned, I just felt like with how the meta was, with a lot of Zen deck being present, if you can present 7 breakpoints on certain attacks like Command and Conquer, Weakest Link, and Amnesia, as we'll talk about
yep.
probably in a bit, it's
Yep.
just a lot harder for them to block because they basically can't give like 2, 3 blocks. And even against other decks, 7 breakpoint is not a fun breakpoint for people, right?
No, not at all. Not at
Especially
all.
against something like CNC where you can't use a D react, right?
Right.
Yeah. So
Yep.
I was very happy with the Clash of Might.
Okay, so Clash of Might. So we have two disable. People bounce around between two and three. Three chokeslam. This is like a staple at this point, right? Two crush the
Yeah.
weak. The two out muscle. So the weakest link. This has been a more popular card. I've been playing this card a lot lately. It's not in my cast homes list that's on that Victor Discord, but the ones that I've been kind of iterating on, this card is definitely in there. The three of, but the two that I want to talk about specifically more is Amnesia. So let's start with that, and then we'll talk about Out Muscle and why you're on Out Muscle while not having Amethyst type thing. I understand why, but I'll let you take it away on the Amnesia first.
Yeah. So Amnesia is primarily pretty much just for Zen. If their cards don't have names, they can't do their crazy bonds lines. Now,
Mm,
obviously, I think it's actually probably worse now just because of the bonds ban.
right.
But I think at this event, it was a pretty solid choice. It also has some other applications that people don't often think about. Like for example, into Prism. Even though the Prism, it's not that necessary. Also, another really funny interaction is against Bolton, where they have Spirit Arena in play,
Mm,
and Lumina Tension doesn't actually, or Lumina Tension can't be played instant speed. That's also another funny
right.
one. But yeah, I just because of how the list actually is constructed, so I try to go to 30 blues into certain matchups that are more aggro, just
Okay.
so you're more able to consistently hit like Clash, and also Rousing Agents is a pretty bad card for blocking, obviously.
Right.
And just the 2 cost, like something like that costs 2 is a lot nicer than something that costs like 5, like Disable, for example, which is
Mm,
why that card is down to 2. And also 2 is obviously very good with Pummel, and you can also play it off just the Golden Sun, right? Like
right.
you don't need to have a blue like you would need for Crush the Week. And another reason for playing like this 2-2 split of disruption between like Amnesia, Crush the Week is you maybe have like more flexibility. Like if you have both in hand, you can kind of decide, hey, I'm gonna play this card instead of this card because I think it's better in this spot. Whereas if you have just like 3 of one card, you don't really have that flexibility.
Right. Yep.
And a card I really want to shout out actually is Weakest Link. I think that card is probably going to be a staple in Victor now,
This
not
card
only
is
for
very
Zen,
strong.
but I think it has a lot of applications. Um, One that is quite good, I think, is Brood, or specifically like KO or Labaya,
Hmm. Yep.
which are traditionally poor matchup for Victor. If you can play this, it's actually potentially stronger than Command and Conquer in some situations, just because they don't
Sure.
really run
Yep.
defense reactions, and also they don't have an arsenal sometimes. But Weakest Link, it's really hard for them to obviously not draw no blocks, right? Like I think
Right.
they're quite likely to draw no blocks with how their decks are constructed now. Like I know
Mm,
KO specifically runs I think like yellow and red Wild Ride, yellow and red Bear Fangs are pretty standard, and they
right.
also have like maybe red pulping too. So they're quite likely to draw no block, and even Leviah, they're quite also not that unlikely to draw no block.
Right.
Yeah, so I think this card's quite good. Also into the MST heroes like New, Enigma, and Zen. Last but not least, if you play this against an Enigma, um, it can be pretty hard for them to set up a mirror guy play because obviously they want to be playing on their turn, right?
Sure. Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of application with this card, and I've been very impressed with it. Just make sure when you stack your triggers, this hits first before your
Yeah,
pummel. If you do that, yeah,
yeah.
because they can
I
just
remember you told me
discard their
that. Yeah,
transcend card or something along those. Or if you're playing against brute, they discard their bear fangs, and then you show. they show their hand and you get no value. Because I didn't read this the first time when I was looking at this card. It says when it hits a hero, look at their hand, choose a card without any defense and no base. Period. Not zero, but like literally nothing. So it says if you do, they discard it and you draw a card. I just like glossed over the draw card. And I'm like, okay, hold on. This card is really good, especially with that draw. But the Force Disruption, just more things to be able to say, here's a
Yeah,
2-card hand. You have to give me 2 cards back. Like, that's huge for Guardian. Huge. So,
yeah,
super strong card.
especially yeah, especially in Victor, where I think even compared to the other Guardians, you have a pretty high percent of cards you're happy to Arsenal.
Right.
Like even Visit the Goldman Estate is one you're very happy to Arsenal now.
Yep. There's
Um,
there's only like a couple of cards you don't want to Arsenal. It's like obviously the Clash
yeah,
cards, and then I'm not super happy arsenaling like a Debilitator or a Buckling, but you know what I'm saying.
yeah,
But like
yeah. I know what you're saying. Yeah,
the eights are perfectly acceptable for like arsenaling and stuff like that. The majority of your deck is something that you want to arsenal off the draw with the weakest link.
yeah. Also, like the hand information itself is not irrelevant a lot of the time, right?
Mm,
Like if you know what's in your opponent's hand, you just make more informed decisions on what to block with
exactly,
and stuff.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
just the Jataxian probe of this game, being able to see like what their plan is and knowing where you want to block. There are situations where you're playing against Ninja, for example, where they have 3-3 and a 4, and you have a test of strength where normally you might just say, okay, here's my test of strength and you can block here, right? Where you can save it for the 4 breakpoint if it's like a Bittering Thorns or something along those lines. I think is what that card is called. The ones that are relevant on hit, right? So, lot
yeah,
of
yeah,
application with there's just a lot of information that this card gives, and there's a reason this card is climbing in price. When I was picking them up, they were 10, $20. Now they're $30. Like, there's a reason that this card is pretty strong. So out muscle though, talking about this. So you're on 2. Some lists bounce from 2 to 3 or none. It just depends on the situation. But you did cut Anathos from the list, or not cut, but it's just not in your list in general. But you're still playing out muscle. What's the thought process behind that? Because a lot of people marry those two together.
yeah. So I'll muscle. It's primarily just for new at this point to just race
Hmm.
them. Obviously, it's pretty bad into Enigma if they're on the big Phantasm plan,
Sure,
where they just have a ton of attacks that just pop it. Or like I didn't say like pop it, but it's
sure,
basically like popping it, right?
right.
Even into
Yeah,
new
reverse
sometimes they
pop.
have situations. Yeah, even the situations they have where they have like CNC and they can just block it if you don't have a might on it,
Right.
and you're probably pretty sad about that too. But the thing is, with how this deck is built, I'm running I think like Crush the Weak into New, and also Chokeslam, obviously. So
Mm,
even if you can't follow up with the Nothos, you can still send decent damage, right, with the other attacks,
exactly.
or even just following up with like Titan's Fist for like 3 card 10 isn't the end of the world, right? Like that's still decent damage.
Right.
But I do think the shield is quite important into New, especially just to be able to have your customs on instantly, and also they do have like on hits that are quite relevant to block with the shield.
Mm,
So something we're gonna probably look at in a bit is I actually prefer running Snapdragon Scalers into New,
sure.
just because giving them the Quicken I feel is extremely, extremely, extremely bad sometimes.
Yeah,
Because you're
they
like,
transcend
oh,
on
I
you
can,
and you did that. It's
yeah,
super bad. It's super bad.
yeah,
Yeah,
you're like, oh,
so
I can block Mistblade, but I'm giving them a Quicken, so it's like the Mistblade hit me, right?
right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's fair.
Yeah,
There's a lot of risk with civic steps. Card's great, but in some matchups it's just a liability. And I
yeah,
get that. So that's uh good points on this. So I tend to agree. I still have this in my list, even though I'm not playing Anathos as well. I've been kind of like taking a page from your book and trying that out. My biggest thing was the Enigma matchup. I'm still trying to make sure that that's it. That's the only reason I really want Anathos is for that, and then maybe new. But like you said, like being able to guarantee that your Visit Goldmane estate is going to, whenever you draw it, always be turned on because of your Crown of Dominion and your shield is actually like paramount to this style deck. So
yeah,
the
yeah,
other sideboard cards, though, so you have both Snapdragon Scalers and Time Skippers and no AB. So tell us why you don't have no AB, or why you have no AB.
yeah. So I think there was only one roulette at the entire event. and that was a class that I was basically not expecting to be represented at all.
Sure.
Especially since this is the last week of nationals. It's not really like U.S. nationals where it's a more open field after the drop of the new sets.
Right.
Um, and also, as I said earlier, I think like Kano is kind of an auto loss.
Mm,
Now, I was considering potentially just running one Arcane Barrier, just maybe for Prism and Runeblade.
mm,
But the problem with that is you kind of want different slots. Like into Runeblade, you want obviously Null Rune legs because you don't want to be given the Quicken tokens, and into Prism, you want Null Rune arms just because you want time skippers, right? So I was like, well, if I'm not running, like if I have to choose, I feel like that's not even worth it at that point because you're kind of like just hedging and you're hedging a matchup that, like with Prism, you probably don't even need it. And for Runeblade, like I said, I was probably going to see any. And even
mm.
then, I don't think Vincent is completely unwinnable. Like I think it's probably very hard to lose with Null Rune legs, but you can probably just disrupt them enough. But yeah, like I said, it wasn't a matchup I was expecting to see.
Yeah. No,
And
it
if you're not
makes
expecting to
sense.
see the matchup, yeah,
A lot of people are really afraid to just like make that cut, even though they know they're like never going to see the thing. And if they do see Kano, like, oh no, I'm dead anyway, right? Like, it makes sense to
yeah,
me. So you still got Balance of Justice because you're playing that against, I assume Zen. We'll look at it in just a second. And then KO. The main reason I like Balance is for KO, and obviously it's very strong in Zen too. If they're on the Art of
yeah,
War plan, which most of them are, Civic Steps is your blocking boot because your other boots don't block. Crown of Dominion is, at this point for me a staple. For you, probably a staple. And then you have you just got the whole wardrobe of shoes. That's it. That's good. That's good.
yeah.
I've done this before as well. Okay, good deal.
Not
So
Null Rune boots though, of course.
besides that, you got three shoes. You
Yeah,
don't need a fourth. Okay, like you got your work shoes, you got your loafers. You're good to go. Okay,
yeah,
so we have done the deck walkthrough. You guys kind of see the structure of the list, and we're going to look at the ratios and whatnot in just a second. What would you consider to be the good and the bad matchups of Victor in general, at least for this style of build?
yeah. So for this style of build, I think you're pretty favored into a lot of aggro decks.
Mm,
Like for example, Zen, I think is a pretty favored matchup. Unless you're not drawing like all red hands and missing all your clashes.
Sure, sure. And getting
Uh,
IP2s. Yeah,
yeah,
fair enough.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That as well. That as well. Also, Azalea is probably Azalea is a pretty good matchup, even though she's kind of fallen off a bit.
Mm,
Mechanologist, I think, is a pretty decent matchup now too, just because of what I said before, the cast home synergy. They're just not really able to block what you can dish out anymore.
sure.
And overall, I think Victor's just a really solid deck. It's a lot of decks. Like even I think Warrior now, Warrior might not be as bad anymore with the prevalence of Visit the Gold main estates.
Right, right.
Now, what I think are bad matchups are obviously decks that can go really tall or decks that have been traditionally a bad matchup for Guardian like Illusionist. Well, like I said before, the Enigma builds that we're basically seeing this weekend are so highly tech for Zen that they just have to tank other matchups that they normally shouldn't be tanking.
Right.
Like Victor, for example, where they're just forced to play Phantasm attacks into you. So I do think that an Aura build of Prism that's more focused on playing like 10Ks, like you said, and playing a lot of instant speed stuff, is definitely more troubling to play against
Right.
because your disruption is a lot worse versus them because they just like vomit out their hand in response to the disruption you present. But I do think the ones that we're seeing are an okay matchup.
Mm,
And
mm,
Kano obviously is like if you're against a good Kano player, I like to call like a go to lunch matchup. Um,
right.
I think Brood's also a bad matchup, specifically like KO and to some extent Levia. But I do think the weakest link can help equalize those matchups to some degree.
Yeah, it definitely
And
helps. It definitely helps.
yeah, I do think New is a bad matchup. Like if you're against a good New pilot, but I don't think it's as bad as people are saying.
Yeah.
Um,
Some people say
are
it's
we gonna look
hopeless.
over?
It's
Yeah,
wild.
yeah. Are we gonna look over like the individual cyborg
We
plans?
are.
Or
We are. Yeah.
yeah, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So I do have like a kind of funny cyber plan to New.
Sure.
Um, which we'll go over in a bit, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. For
But
sure.
yeah, New is
So,
like if you draw like two of the same name blues into bonds, you're pretty sad because you just don't.
yeah.
A lot of time you just like want to say no blocks into bonds of agony, right? Like
Right.
okay, you can get like it's kind of a lose lose, right? Like if you throw your entire hand in front of it, you're usually just giving them multiple blues anyways. and you just can send no damage, right?
Right. Yep. Yep. That makes sense.
Um,
It's like a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
yeah. But when you're really damned is when you want to clap back on them and you just draw two blues with the same name, you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm just forced into blocking now.
Right.
And another thing I was going back and forth a lot on, which might be funny, is I was actually going back and forth on Crater Fist versus Gauntlet of Ironwell, just because I was debating,
Okay.
is Crater Fist ability like, it could be potentially relevant if you're trying to push damage into like an Enigma to clear their board,
Mm,
or
mm.
into New if you're just trying to stun like Crush the Weak for 9 or something. But Gauntlet's Fire Will's like ability is kind of relevant to New too, so I just ended up staying with that one, just because I
Sure.
don't think I have the actual blues to support Creative Fist really.
Yeah, this is not so much a traditional style guardian that you're used to seeing 40 blues and whatnot into. It's like you got 33, a lot of matchups you're doing 30, and then in some of my more recent lists, I've been playing 27 blues into certain matchups, which some people are, oh my god, that's crazy. But okay, so just review. So good matchups. You're basically okay into everything except for Kano, right? New can be
Yeah,
very
that
difficult.
one's a really bad one. Yeah,
Yeah, Kano's like an auto loss basically, especially when you don't have AV. But so Kano new can be pretty difficult, and then the illusionists, depending on how they're built, specifically Enigma, if she's on the aura plan, can be a little more difficult as well because you don't have the over the top power unless you're chaining your gold main estates like back to back turns and being able to continuously clear and send a pummel on the off turns, so on and so forth. Would you tend to agree? And
yeah, I
KO.
agree with
KO's
that for
bad too.
sure. Yeah, yeah, but I think KO might not be. Um, it might be a little better now just because of I think Weakest Link helps quite a bit in that
Right.
matchup because they obviously have a lot of no blocks that they would rather not discard, right?
Right, exactly. And they're also cutting cast bones, which is where the cast homes,
Yeah,
monogram comes from. So because they're cutting that, that was the card that always gave me the most fits because they would go cast bones, set up big turn, and it's hard for you to kind of capitalize on your hands and whatnot. Now that they're cutting that, I've had a lot more success playing against KO and brutes in general. So let's go ahead and segue into these. We'll just kind of go top down. We've already talked a lot about different matchups, but just give me a broad strategy on each matchup, like what you're kind of trying to do. You're trying to be aggro, you're trying to be mid range, you're trying to be control fatigue style, right? And your methodology on why you're playing above 60 if you have a matchup that you're doing that on.
yeah. So into Azalea, I never actually I never actually played against an Azalea on Victor,
Sure.
but the methodology behind this is you're just trying to continuously disrupt them, and you block quite well, right?
Right.
You just have the traditional cards that are very good against them, like Chokeslam, makes them very sad. Command and Conquer makes them very sad. Disable makes them very sad. Final Crush makes them very sad.
Mm.
You just play those
All of
every
these cards
turn.
are really good for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're playing all
And the
the
cards that are not in,
block
oh
cards and
sorry,
whatnot, and you're good. You're good.
yeah,
So the cards that are not in, please continue.
yeah. So Weakest Link is kind of just there as like a kind of like whatever card. It doesn't
Mm.
really matter whether it's like Amnesia or uh or Crush the Weak. Really, it's just like it's just a random 2 for 6. Just to fill in slots. Like obviously, if you want to tech a bit more for Azalea, maybe a third disable could be better.
Sure.
Um, yeah, just to have the additional arsenal disruption. But at that point, it's probably like you're probably just splitting hairs, right, for the matchup.
Exactly. Yep. And
Yeah,
Weakest League it has text against Azalea. Like they still play
yeah,
Rain
it
Razors,
has.
so it's
Yeah,
not
that's true. That's
it's
true. It
not
has
bad.
text.
Yeah. So you're not on any defense reactions either. I know we kind of glossed that over when we were kind of going through the deck walkthrough. So would you think that defense reactions would make this matchup a little bit more favored? Now you said you haven't played a whole lot of Azalea, but in theory, do you need defense reactions?
I would say so. I played a lot against Azalea before as Guardian, as I mentioned,
Right.
with Bravo, and there I was running like blue unmovable kind of,
Mm,
but I think in this list it's just not worth it because number one, you have way lower blue counts, so you're
mm,
gonna have a harder time paying for it, and number two, I think these victory lists especially, you just want to be being more aggro especially with Visit the Goldman Estate. If you're just able to stack my tokens and continually present these big attacks,
Right.
then there's just not really much that you can do about it, right?
Right.
Like they have to block at some point, and they're just gonna start having a bad time, pretty much, right?
Yeah.
So I don't
Exactly.
think you really need those defense reactions, and also, missing clashes,
Yeah.
missing clashes is
That's
always
the
bad,
big
right? Like
thing.
nobody wants to miss class.
Yeah,
Yeah,
missing the clashes is the big downside to it. So that's why you're going to see a lot of lists not play sync below or any of those other ones that traditional like uh, defense reactions that Guardians like to play, like their staunch responses and whatnot. So makes sense to me. I've been playing without defense reactions for a long time. Agree with that. The only other thing that I see here is you got balance of justice over the crown of dominion, right? So balance of justice against Azalea, if unless I remember incorrectly, there's no way that you're actually drawing the card, right? So you're just using this
yeah,
straight for the block to be able to pivot when
yeah,
you need to.
yeah. Azalea just has like some of the scariest audience in the game, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So sometimes you just want to block. Is That's really the short end of it, basically.
Sure.
Obviously, uh, technically, Crown of Providence is like better in that slot. If you want to sync an
Yes.
Arsenal, but at that point, it's kind of like splitting hairs, right? So you just take the two block.
Right.
Um, yeah, let me put it this way: I think there's a lot other cards that would have a higher priority than Crown of Providence in this list if you were looking at additional sideboard tech.
Right. Yeah, and I'm also in the same situation where it's balance of justice and crown of dominion because you just have one more hat that you're going to bring in like here and there. Those two supplement pretty much every matchup the way that it needs to, and that there's really no need for another hat. Right. So
Yeah,
makes sense to me. We'll go to Bolton, your other favorite.
yeah, yeah. So it's kind of the same idea. Um, you just present as much disruption as possible. And I
Mhm.
believe we're at 30 blues in this matchup, correct?
30 blues. Yep, that is correct.
Yeah.
So no
So into
rouse the
aggro, you're
ancients
often
here.
fine. Yeah. Like rousing agents effectively like blocks for one into Bolton, right? So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
so it's not great blocking card there. And into these matchups that are more aggro, I often find that because you're winning clashes more often, you usually need less blues actually, right?
Right.
Because you just have such a high chance to win. Probably gonna be drawing a card anyways.
Yeah. Most of the
And
time it's a blue.
I kind of mentioned this. Yeah, yeah, I kind of mentioned this before. Um, Amnesia does have like a bit of a funny interaction with Spirit of Arena, where Luminescent doesn't have a name.
Right. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's super
I guess there's like
interesting.
yeah, there's a slight argument for weakest link over that, just because if they actually have the spirit in hand, or they're playing Remembrance, for example. But I think at
Sure.
that point, it's kind of like splitting hairs, right?
Yeah, yeah, same
Um,
thing. So it's six one way, half a dozen the other. I think this in general would probably be um a more relevant on hit. I don't know if that makes sense. They're both like kind of niche in the situation. This is a card that you're probably going to block with a lot of times, but
yeah,
this holds a pummel really well, just like all the other
yeah,
two for
yeah,
sixes, right? So,
yeah,
uh,
and
Tunic
and
Pummel is the
well,
reason to play the style of deck.
yeah,
Plus the clashes in the cast homes and whatnot. You have a lot of disruption, a lot of like just over the top power. So,
yeah. Well, Bolton does rely on spirit sometimes to actually get not really go again, but to get action points on their first attack. If
right,
they're just not able to even go again, they can be like pretty sad, right?
exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep.
and I think this
So
matchup might be something that gets more relevant with the release of the new structure deck, but
exactly.
we'll
Yep.
see. Yeah.
So would you consider this matchup to be favored, unfavored, kind of middle ground? Like, because we have a bunch of different variations of Bolton, and you can build the deck or sideboard the deck in a way to, combat the combo or combat the Raiden. This variation, would you play this on Bolton blind? This is your blind consideration?
What do you mean blind consideration?
Like if you're going into Bolton, you don't know if they're
Oh,
combo or Raiden.
yeah,
Is
yeah.
this built to be towards one version versus the other?
So I think if they're on combo into Victor, that's usually I would say a mistake just because you have so much disruption for their combo that it's really hard for them to actually pull it off successfully. So
Okay.
I would probably expect to see Raiden Bolton
Hmm.
or even Decimator. Like you probably don't change too much. If you're against the Decimator Bolton, I guess there is an argument to bring in potentially muscles instead of the amnesias, just to be able to trade damage more efficiently with them.
Sure.
Because obviously they don't have too many poppers for that, you know.
Right.
But into blind, I would definitely say this is probably the most consistent list. Because I think Radiant's probably like by far the most popular,
Mm,
and I think Bolton. Um, it's hard to so before MST, I always felt like it was kind of a close matchup. And obviously, now Victor has gotten a very good card, and Bolton has also gotten some very good cards. So now I think it's also probably not. I wouldn't say it's like too much favorite one way or the other, but maybe Bolton could potentially be a little better into Victor now, just because of how Saving Grace synergizes with some of the new equipment. For example,
sure.
you're just able to very efficiently fridge some big attacks from Victor.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. So, um,
Yeah,
not that bad one way or another. In conclusion, it sounds like
yeah,
probably more of a
yeah.
skill style matchup, right?
Yeah, I would say it's definitely very skillful matchup, and
Okay.
also it's very skillful when to use civic steps too.
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
Yeah,
This is a skill card in general. You got to learn how to block with this card properly
yeah,
from day
yeah.
one. Whenever
So
you
there's
start
like some
playing.
matchups where it's pretty easy to tell into Bolton. There
Mm,
can be windows where it's pretty easy to tell, but it can be hard to identify those windows if they're like holding a card in hand, for example, right?
right. Yep.
Yeah,
All right. So we're going to the brute. You have them all smashed together. You're playing against Ryan RKO and Labaya all in the
yeah.
same way. So, of course, Balance of Justice is going to shine in these matchups because Blood Rush Bellows
Oh,
is
hang
one of
on.
the most pushed
Sorry,
cards ever. Go ahead.
can I just have like 10 seconds? Yeah.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm back.
No, you're good. You're good. So, uh, Balance of Justice, they're playing Blood Rush Bellows, very good against that. Labaya plays Art of War, so you have even more windows for that. So, obviously, this makes sense. But, what is your thought process on like playing the two trounces over the amnesia, that kind of thing, right?
I I guess my thought process is amnesia and doesn't really have like too much text into brutes.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, it's not really much applications with that. And with Trounce, you can potentially win. Like it's pretty unlikely you're gonna lose.
Right.
And obviously, even if you do lose, technically, it's pretty bad. But if you win, the upside is usually worth it. So it's kind of like
Yeah.
three block, three block. You might as well play like the three block that gives you a little more upside. Would be my my logic behind it, I'd say.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that's kind
Crush
of
the
where
Weak
I'm
is
at
just
too.
yeah. Crush the Weak is just like a better rate of damage than Amnesia if you're just playing it off of blue, for example.
Sure.
But I don't think you're super happy to pummel Amnesia, like tunic pummel
Mm,
Amnesia.
mm.
You probably want to save that for weakest link or CNC when you can, right?
Yep, all of that makes sense. So, Trounce in general, at least for me, most of the time, if you do the clash math, and there's a calculator on Fab ready for that, um, the majority of the time it's going to be literally just a three block, which is the same for these other cards, right? But the upside is monumental, right? It's super big deal if you get the clash and you're able to have the extra card. That's huge. It can actually just win you the game randomly. And then the downside is you give them a vigor and a might, which is bad. And they also get a gold too, but they're not drawing the extra card like we do, right? So we're stacked to benefit higher than they are with the trounce win on their side. So yes, it's bad if they get a might, but it's honestly probably worth the risk because of the way the math works out. Um, it's not very likely that they will win both clashes, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep,
Also, it's a bit of a bad matchup. So I think at some point you have to take like a bit of a risk to actually
you have
get
to.
ahead, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep. So I've had that conversation with Michael Fing as well, talking about like, what cards to play. He kind of, we had a conversation about playing Trounce into the Brutes and like us needing just to have something to get there. Another card that I have not been super happy with in the past is the Clash of Mights into the Brutes, um, because most of the time, well, half the time you're not going to win that, or it's just going to be some draw or something like that. Especially against KO, you give them extra might. That's what their deck wants to do anyway. Um, Would you ever consider yourself maybe cutting Clash of Might for something like a Rousey Ancients? Maybe you think that would be like a
Yeah,
reasonable take?
yeah, I think that's a definitely a consideration. I think the a problem with Rousey Ancients could be maybe like flesh bag. If you present like a big go again attack and they see you have like two cards in hand,
Exactly.
they're like, well, I can just flesh bag and kind of like shut down your turn, right?
But if they're flesh
Um,
bagging your Rousey Ancients, they're not flesh bagging your pummel.
that is true. That's true. But usually with pummel, you can kind of just like pack it in arsenal for a bit,
Exactly.
and then
Yeah.
it's pretty hard for them to actually stop it. But I think Clash might. Um, I will say that your like if you win it, your breakpoints for damage are probably going to be more relevant just because you're presenting disruption
Correct.
as
Yep.
opposed to their breakpoints for damage. But I think there's an argument either way. Obviously, Clash of Might does block 3 and Rousing Agents does block 2. So if you're just blocking with it, and even if you do lose, technically it's like the same value there, right?
Right. Yep. I was about to make that comparison as well. It's like you have a 2 block, you have a 3 block, but you're giving them +1. They're kind of 2 blocks anyway, but it's another thing to kind of benefit off of. Makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like sometimes if you got like that summon breakpoint like I'm talking about with Command and Conquer, it can be really rough for them to block it out, right? Or like Weakest Link, for
Exactly.
example. Yeah, because they can't just give you like they can't just give you 2 cards and send back their Bear Fangs. They have to start giving you armor.
Mm.
Which might not be ideal for them sometimes.
So this card, do you consider this like a card that you want to keep in your deck going forward? You think it's like a super solid
Yeah.
one?
So I was actually this Clash of my slot. I was considering a few cards, and Nicola kind of put me on this card, and I ended up agreeing with him. So a few cards I was considering in that slot were like blue Boulder Drop,
Right.
blue Wallop just for the bigger high roll,
Right.
and even actually Ripple Away. Just because you can do some pretty funny stuff with
Right.
Ripple Away. Like your
Right.
opponent plays Spectral Manifestations and they try to like restless it. You can discard you can discard Ripple Away to stop them from making the shield, right?
Exactly. And then they just
Yeah,
waste a
or
card
even just like
entirely. Mm.
yeah, or even just like cast bones. But I ultimately decided, because I'm expecting to see a lot of Zen, um, this card's probably going to be the most relevant, and it was pretty relevant, like presenting that 7 breakpoint on an attack they don't want to block, right?
Right. Did that happen a lot?
Oh yeah, it happened a lot. Yeah,
Okay.
like this card definitely performed quite well for me.
Nice. Okay, so that
Yeah,
that's good to know. This is something that I'll be testing a little bit more as well. I've tested it in the past, but during the before cast homes was a thing, I tested this card, and KO was at its peak, and I was consistently losing and just giving them mites, and I was like, this is a disaster. So I cut it for
yeah,
that. But I'm happy to go and try it again. I'm glad that you found success with that, and honestly, it's kind of exciting. I love sending Ira style things, right? Like Command and Conquer 7. Sounds awesome. Okay.
yeah.
Any closing thoughts on Brute? Like, good
Um,
matchup, bad matchup. We know it's a little bit bad, but is
yeah.
it as bad as it
Well,
used to be?
uh, it's it's probably not as bad as it used to be just because of weakest link.
Right.
Uh, yeah, I never actually I never actually played this matchup with Castones, but I
Yeah.
assume it helps
Yeah.
quite a bit. Just because you can't actually get like it's not impossible to get 3 gold, right? Because you already start with 1 with the shield
Right.
and Tesla strength can win, right?
Mhm.
Like it's not unlikely for Tesla strength to win.
And worst case scenario, this is a 3 block. It's fine.
Yeah, worst case
It's always
worst
a
case
great
scenario
card.
you can just like yeah you can just play it anyways, right? If you want trying to convert your hand, and you're
Exactly.
pretty happy to just play it anyways.
Yep. Yep. Like, you see this turn one, even if you're not going to make the bites off of that, still not bad. Still not bad to just draw
Yeah,
a card,
yeah,
kind of fix your hand, and then your other visit Goldman states are going to be turned on, and you'll be fine. Okay. So let's do Dash IE. Now you were saying that this is a little bit more favorable matchup now. You're playing Crown of Dominion and Snapdragon Scalers. Snapdragon Scalers specifically only for E Strike, nothing else really spicy,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, so Snap is there for kind of like 2 reasons. Number one, it's kind of a hedge, if they're on a full pistol package. And number two, even if they're on like a boost package, Civic Steps often is quite poor because
Right.
every time you give them a quicking token, it kind of just represents more deck health, right?
Right.
And if
Yep.
you're trying to fatigue them, that's not really where you want to be at. And for the rest of the cards, it's just your pretty standard disruption package plus clash package. Weakest Link is quite good against Dash, like I
Again,
said earlier.
card's great.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, I had like a turn where I went Rouse into Weakest Link Pummel, and I discarded 2 cards. I discarded a Tekla Core, and another card. So that was very I was very happy with that.
Yeah, yeah.
And obviously, Chokeslam is pretty good against like Tackle Pounder, right? They just can't gain attack from it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're cutting
So
disable zealous belting is something that I'm traditionally used to playing in here. You are not playing it in this slot, right? So you just don't think you need that extra card, like the extra go again.
no, I don't think you probably don't need it, right?
Yeah.
You have like you're pretty happy with the other reds in this list, I think,
Mm,
and I don't think you're super happy to be playing like a 2 for 5 two block really,
yeah.
especially when you can just like stack a bunch of gold and just kill them that way, right? Like I think
Right.
that's how you're trying to win this matchup now is you just stack a million my tokens and bonk them really hard with a golden sun, right?
Yeah, yeah. As
Yeah,
we want to do with every matchup. Yep. No, that
yeah,
makes sense. That makes sense.
yeah,
Okay, good deal. So the zealous belting, it looks like it's predominantly being played into stuff like Enigma and whatnot. And we'll get to that
yeah.
in
Enigma
just a
and
second.
new, yeah,
Yep. So straight 60 here. Uh, Pretty standard loadout besides the Snapdragon Scalers. You know, some people play this, some people don't.
yeah,
I agree with the Civic Steps. There's a lot of situations where you block and you just give them a whole bunch of extra value. It's kind of hard to time that correctly, and against the other mechs, it's like actually a disaster. So having something, even if they T-bone you, you can block with this, which is nice too.
yeah.
I do that
That
a
too, that
lot.
too.
Yep.
Also, Crown Dominion. I don't know if we talked about that, but like I said, if you're trying to hedge, it's usually a very safe hedge because you're just like as soon as you play one cast films, you're pretty happy with Crown Dominion.
Right.
And if you
Yep.
play multiple, the value starts getting pretty crazy.
Right. Yep. I agree. I actually play this in a lot more matchups than you do, I believe. Not saying one way is better or not, right? But yeah, this card just being able to turn on the value of the gold main estate is just it's astronomical. So okay,
Yeah.
so we're talking about Dio now. So traditionally for me, this has been a more kind of blockout style, like mid-range game. They leave me with cards. I'm happy to attack, right? How would you approach
Yeah.
this?
Yeah. So here you're just kind of trying to lock them up more, like I said. It's in disruption when you can. But
Mm,
obviously, Dio can have some pretty crazy spike turns, so it can usually be correct to send back above rate disruption to them if you're not taking like a million damage from blue grenades. That's also one reason why Civic Steps and Balance of Justice are in this deck instead of like Snapdragon Skillers, for example,
right.
just because blue grenades represent so much value if they actually hit with it.
Mm,
And for the rest of it, it's on the 30 blues. You cut Browse the Ancients because that's a 2 block, and you're just trying to win Clash as often as possible, right?
right. Yep.
Yeah,
So the civic steps, one way to kind of think about this, right, the way I kind of evaluate it is giving them a quicken token. Yeah, they get another pistol shot, but if you're able to save 4 life because of a boom grenade, the opportunity cost is higher. Like you're losing 2 damage, but you gained 2 life, right? So
yeah,
did you kind of evaluate that the same way?
yeah. That's definitely how I look at it exactly.
Okay.
If you can stop a boom grenade or boom grenades from hitting if they have multiple,
Right.
it's definitely worth the slot then, right? You just
Yeah,
try to fridge
exactly.
them out on those turns. But on turns where they're kind of more set up, you have enough reds that you're able to effectively disrupt them, more
Mm,
or less. And especially, we come back again to weakest link. Uh, yes, in addition
yeah.
to the other reds, obviously, that are just like your standard disruption guardian package,
Right.
pretty
Yep.
much.
Card is huge. Another cute thing that if you block with balance of justice against like a T-bone or something like that, and then another turn they decide T-bone, you can block with balance of justice again because it has guardwell, right? So that's another thing. It's like
Yeah,
this the pseudo snap style. So you kind of get the balance of that, right? To where you have the protection from your T-bone. You can protect your tunic mainly is the thing you're trying to protect the most, right? So
yeah.
I do
Well,
like this
also they
tech
can just
for
draw
that.
2 cards, right?
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah,
it definitely can
remember
draw
that.
two
So
cards against them. They do a lot more like Toma Final style things. Like we've seen that pretty popular. Okay, good matchup. Would you agree?
yeah, it's a good matchup. Yeah,
Yep. Cool. All right, so we are at Enigma. We're talking about the Crown of Dominion. Now you're playing Gauntlets of Iron Will and Snapdragon Scalers. This makes sense to me. I've been playing Vambrace in this slot, but you mentioned earlier in this video that you were more than happy to kind of like have the extra block from the shield and the gloves to be able to kind of like counteract their attacks when you don't have like a clash or something along those lines.
Yeah. So, so I think one way to actually look at the gloves is just if you're trying to convert your hand. So for example, if you have Nothos in this matchup, right? Um
Yes, I played that in the past. I've been
yeah,
playing more small hammer, but
yeah.
yep,
So if you have a Nothos and Vambrace, oftentimes it can actually be kind of hard to convert. I'm not gonna say like hard, but it might be more optimal to block with your hand, like block with like for example, if you have like Zealous Belting and two blues and Chokeslam, like Nothos um and Vambrace, it can maybe be correct just to like Zealous Belting block with Chokeslam and instead of Nothos with Vambrace up because that represents only technically one less offensive value, but you get three more life.
right,
And on the flip side, if you have Gauntlets of Iron Will and Titan's Fist, you just have more block value instead. But what you're actually converting that block value to is being able to effectively send your red attacks following maybe a Zealous Belting or an Enlightened Strike instead of sending Titan's Fist when you have to, right?
right. No, that makes sense to me.
Um,
Just having the extra value on your gloves and being able to maximize the value of your hand as much as you can without having to feel like you're forced into the blocking scenarios like what you're talking
yeah.
about.
And also, Enigma does play some disruption that you can just want to block sometimes with your equipment. Like they can
Mm,
command and conquer you, following maybe like a Mirror swing or something.
right,
And if you're out like Van Brace in that slot, you go, oh my god, I have to start giving them cards in hand. I can't just armor
right,
block this, right?
right. Yeah, yeah, it can
Yeah,
definitely be a bad situation with the Command and Conquers and any other on hit that might be relevant. I think that's the only one really. But yeah, yeah, just also being able to cover up like the miraging metamorph and not having to pop it when you know they have like a 10k or something along those lines if they're playing the more like Guardian Hate style. Yeah, it
yeah.
makes sense to
But
have a little bit extra block.
it's also a pretty bad matchup that even if you like, I actually this is one of the matchups I actually tested before.
Mm,
Actually, I played this deck. I tested mainly into like Enigma and New, and the
right,
more Guardian Hate matchups of Enigma were pretty hard, even on Bad Grace and Nothos if they knew how to navigate it. Because like you said, 10k just makes you very miserable.
right,
So I just kind of felt that was kind of like that was kind of over like the Nothos plus Fan Base was overkill into the Enigma styles that were trying to beat Zen, which I do
right,
think was the correct
right,
style to play if you were playing Nats that weekend, just because like we said, there's a sea of Zens.
right.
So I felt like this style was adequate to just beat those Enigma decks. Like, you have your and you just start smashing them, right?
No, makes sense. Okay,
Yeah.
so this is a slightly unfavored matchup. You can still get there, right?
Yeah, I'd say it's slightly in favorite, but depending on the build, it's definitely not a bad matchup if they're on like aggro counter kind of builds, I'd say.
Mm, yep. Yeah, yeah, they're more aggressive. They're playing the Team Ascent style list or something along those lines where they're playing all of those. It's really not that bad. And the cuts make sense to me. You're cutting some of these bigger attacks. I played around with playing this. When I'm playing Vambrace, I actually do enjoy the 5 cost attacks a lot because you get to
Yeah.
go,
Yeah, I
here's
can
a
see that.
9 I have floating, and then you Vambrace, and there's a lot of benefit there. But without Vambrace, I do tend to agree that these lower attacks where you're maximizing the amount of value on the turn cycle makes more sense to me. And Weakest Link, it's it's good because it gets them away from like a mirror guy turn, or if they
Yeah.
want to block with their traverse, like they can't do that turn without having to activate their hero ability to get rid of the chi that was in their deck. So there is a little bit of like weirdness with the matchup that the Weakest Link introduces. It's just it being 6, at least for me in my experience, is a little low unless it's with the pummel, but
Yeah. Well,
it's still a great
also
card.
Clash of Might helps that too, as a bit of a break point, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So even more reason to your deck is more lean towards like having this Weakest Link be a lot more optimized, which I think is uh yeah, super good strategy, especially for this tournament. Okay,
Yeah. No,
so
quite good.
go
Yeah,
ahead.
it was
Yeah,
quite good. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so Fi, we don't expect Vi, but this is a pretty easy matchup,
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah. I will say, Amnesia taking away Phoenix Flame's name is kind of funny sometimes.
it is funny.
But yeah,
Yeah,
beyond that, it's just like standard anti-aggro list.
yep. So
I
you're
think it's the exact same sideboard as no, it's not the exact same sideboard as Zen, but it's pretty close.
yeah. So you're cutting
Yeah,
Weakest Link, Zealous Belting, Rousing Ancients. This card just has no text besides like hitting Art of War, and there are some better options
yeah.
for that as well, like Amnesia. You might be able to swap back and forth between those two. It's fine. This
I
generally
think the
has way
slot,
more text
yeah,
because of the Phoenix Flame.
I think the slot that it's taking here is probably like Enlightened Strike versus Weakest Link. I
Sure,
think you just
sure.
want Enlightened Strike probably just like to actually kill them, right? If you're
Yep.
late stage in the game, you just present more damage.
Yep, and being able to go again into Hammer to present those breakpoints because their deck blocks
Yeah, that's
poorly
true.
anyway is a big deal. Yep. So everything else makes sense. Choke Slam, Crush the Weak, Disables, everything that you would typically play. You're cutting the 2 blocks and the least relevant Disruption style piece. So,
Yeah, pretty much.
okay. So, good matchup. We're going to go to the Guardian Mirror. And okay, I was curious. You are playing Crown of Dominion into this mirror. I love that. And then the Snapdragon Scalers is also quite interesting. I usually play Civic Steps just to be able to cover up potential Command and Conquers, or if I'm playing against Bravo, I definitely want the extra armor there. But I see why the Snapdragon Scalers is there, and if you're playing a mirror style like this, it does make a lot of sense to be able to kind of capitalize off the E-Strike, being able to draw a card, see what happens. Oh, I see this card now. I can snap Snapdragons, knowing that it's a blue to be able to attack with the hammer, right? So, not to speak for you, but what are your
Yeah,
considerations here?
I think with this style list, you're very much just trying to be, I'd say like the more aggressive
Mm,
guardian of the two usually.
mm,
You just have basically like the best breakpoints possible for the damage.
right,
Like Crush the Weak being 3 for 7 is more relevant usually than a 2 for 6, especially if you're playing 33 blues.
right,
And same deal with like Chokeslam. You can tunic it out for 2 card 8, or you can follow it up from Mizelle's Belting.
right, right,
And your fridge isn't completely terrible because of the shield.
right.
Like usually what you'll find is a lot of guardians, they play Nothos in the mirror, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes,
which usually means they'll have less armor themselves, right?
right.
But because you are running the shield, you kind of compensate for maybe not having civic steps in that slot, or having like Crown of Providence in the headpiece, which is quite good against DNC Pummel.
Mm, yep,
But because you have Crown Dominion, you can just start casting your castoms right away. So
exactly.
I think that's pretty huge in this matchup because it's not Guardian is not like Brute where they can always convert their not always convert their hand, but usually Brute doesn't have too much trouble converting their hand to attack points. But Guardian can sometimes have a bit of trouble on that. And if you're running stuff like Visit the Goldman Estates and Crown Dominion, it can be very punishing on off turns, especially, right?
Right. Yep. Makes
Yeah.
sense to me. So these cuts also are pretty traditional style cuts. So you're cutting Spinal Crush. You're playing a couple of Trounce. So are you like? I've heard people talk about pitch stacking this more often. That's kind of the way that I play it as well. I'll block with it if I have to, if I am playing it in the mirror. But ideally, I'm trying to get that to second cycle, if the game even goes that long, which is not completely the goal, right? So, what is your kind
Yeah.
of strategy and thought process behind having Trounce?
I'd say like it's pretty similar to the Brute,
Okay.
where if it hits, you're really happy, but if it misses, you're not like too sad because in the Victor Mirror they don't get the draw from it, correct?
Yeah,
But
because it's your
um
effect creating the
yeah,
gold, they don't draw.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah, they don't get the draw from it, but they do get the other tokens. And I guess especially the gold token can be pretty impactful in the mirror with Visit the Gold Main Estate.
Yes.
Um, but like I said, because they don't get the draw, I think because technically you have the same cards, but you have like a higher upside if you actually win it. I think it's actually probably worth playing if you just look at it from that perspective.
Sure. And
Because usually
you
you're
are
just
playing
gonna
a true mirror in a
you're gonna
way,
tie
right?
probably.
So because you're playing like a more of a true style mirror, it's kind of like a 50-50. And most of the time it's going to be a 3 block, but the times that you do flip Cranial into Macho and you draw that Macho, you feel like a champion, right?
Yeah,
So,
exactly. Yeah,
yeah. Okay, good deal. You're playing the Zealous Belting into here.
yeah,
This is one of the matchups I love playing this in. It's one of the best ones because you're able to pair that with your pummel a lot more frequently. Whereas in other matchups, like it's still a possibility, of course, but this is a matchup that I really look to put these together along with the Command and Conquer, depending on which ones I see first, right? There's a fantastic Arsenal slot. You're doing this back and forth where it's like, I'm handing you two cards, I'm going to swing back, Arsenal Zealous Belting, they attack you, you have two cards, so on and so forth, right? So just being able to maximize the turn cycles, this is one of the best cards to do that. And
Yeah,
then,
yeah, for sure. It's definitely better than El Muscle, which is like very bad in this
yeah,
in the
you
Guardian
can't
one.
play this card in the mirror.
Yeah,
Well, you can, but like you have to get really lucky. You have to like draw it after you had played a visit or something, right? And then
yeah,
hope that
exactly.
they
Yeah,
don't draw like a spinal because it's still only like 9. But anyway,
yeah. So if
um,
you just like play Enlightened Strike and Sal's Ball thing, I think that's usually sufficient
yeah,
for go again.
mhm.
I would say from my experience.
And the rouse, of course. Yep,
Yeah, and the routes too. Yeah, yeah. When
yep,
that lines up.
yep, absolutely. Okay, so favored. No, it's a mirror. Of course not. It's the same. But skill matchup, love the skill matchups. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Max. Traditionally, this is one of the ones that I struggle with because if they fast mech you and then they do their high octane turn, like, what do? You just kind of die. But the block cards are a big deal, and there have been games where I've been able to almost fatigue unintentionally
Yeah,
maxes because of the test of strengths and the trounces. But in general, do you try to go that route, or would you try to be more aggressive, like you're playing against like a pistol dash? Like, what's your vibe?
yeah. So as you can see, there's like Crown Dominion and Snaps. So
Right.
you're definitely trying to be more aggressive because as you mentioned, when Max kind of sets up their high octane turns with their transformation, it can be
Mm,
like really hard to effectively bounce back from that.
right.
Another card that's really fun in this matchup is Amnesia. Because you take away Hyperdriver's name, they're pretty sad, right?
Mm. Yeah, that's good. That's good. So
It's a
Amnesia
fun
has a lot
interaction,
more
yeah.
text than you would initially think. Like there are a lot of like scenarios where this card is actually like pretty solid. I'm kind of learning some things here and there too. I didn't even think about that. So that's awesome
Yeah,
tech.
yeah. Usually, muscles like turned on too in this matchup,
Sure.
so you can you have so much go again, right? That you can probably erase them, but even if you have to swap to fatigue, it's not that unmanageable because you just have like so much. You have so many defensive options too, right? As Guardian,
Right.
yeah, you're definitely trying to be the aggressor in this matchup. I'd say.
Right. Yeah, the times where I go to fatigue, quote unquote, is they go fast mech and I've been attacking them. My life total's high enough to where I know that like, okay, my only real way out is to have them do their thing. They're attacking me with mech, a couple of times a turn. Most of the time, a good max will wait and then try to just unload all the shells at once, right? And go like, I'm going to attack you for 6, or 6 for 6 times and deal like a crazy amount of damage. But there are scenarios where if you put them in a position where they feel like they have to do like a kind of more mini style combo, these block cards will win you the game like single handedly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Also, they can't really not walk into them early game, right?
Right.
Um,
Yep.
Yeah, so you usually get enough gold that when you draw your customs, you can just play it and get a ton of bites and start racing them from there. And
Yep.
even if they do have a transformation at that point, you potentially just go over where they can block, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So the thing with Max, right? Just for the viewers, they are forced to boost to be able to activate to make hyperdrivers, if I'm not mistaken, right? So they will
Yeah,
always give you an opportunity to block with your block cards, always until they decide to mech and they just decide to turtle up or something along those lines. That is a possibility that has happened in the past, which I do think is probably optimal for the maxes to be able to have the best shot at being able to just kind of one shot you. That's kind of their goal. But all in all, it's not the best matchup. I but it's not the worst. It's not the worst. I'd rather see this than a
yeah.
lot of other decks, right?
And I think a lot of people traditionally viewed Mechanologist as being kind of good into Guardian to some extent, depending on how your deck is constructed.
Mm,
Just because you have a lot of block value and you're able to set up pretty big pivot turns
mm,
if you're not on full boost your deck away and you just get fatigued. But I think with the introduction of Castomes, we're gonna be seeing for example Turtle Dash. I think it's gonna have very hard time effectively blocking out Victor now,
Right.
especially.
Yep. Even Turtle Dash in the past that I played one at Pro Tour, and this was before Castones was even a thing. And I was able to consistently just like slam them with go again attacks, and all of these like clash cards were just like just eating them alive, right? So
Yeah,
this just makes it even better. But I was playing Amethyst back then, but you don't need Amethyst anymore because you have Titan's Fist. Okay,
yeah,
cool. So we'll go to new. So this is one of the matchups that we're going to see more often in these upcoming metas. Like any of these MST heroes are going to be very popular. You are playing Snapdragon Scalers, kind of Dominion. So I know we had a conversation kind of offline about this, where I was playing the Civic Steps, and you're playing the Snapdragon. You mentioned that sometimes giving them that block and giving them the quick and token can be a disaster, right? So
yeah, yeah. Definitely, if they have a G in hand and you have multiple blues and you're banished,
right,
you're like, well, these civic steps don't really do anything, right? So I think as Victor, you definitely want to be the aggressor in this matchup. This is one of the matchups I tested a lot,
okay,
and I think against a lot of news that don't have like that many cards that actually banish your graveyard,
mm,
you should be pretty okay into them. If you it just doesn't matter if you have a lot of blues and banish because they just don't have the life buffer to be able to use news ability, right?
right, yep.
Yeah, I guess
So
I'm also just there as another tool to race them.
sure,
You're obviously
sure,
pretty sad when they have a CNC for it. I
right,
don't think Death Touch is super popular, but that could also be potentially one that can block this. And I don't think you're like super sad then because it's only a 2 block.
mm,
But yeah, it's not great too because you don't have a follow up attack.
right,
Yeah, like you see, we're on like Crown Dominion, Snapdragon Skillers. Just turn on that Visible Only Slate right away, smash them really hard, really fast,
sure.
and hopefully you get there before
Now,
they get your blues and banished.
did you test other strategies with this? Did you do like a mid-range style strategy, or did you just kind of lean into the aggressive strategy and it just started working for you?
I just basically lean into the aggressive strategy right away because I've heard from a
Okay.
lot of victors that fatigue strat's kind of miserable
I don't
because
think
there's
you
like
can
not
fatigue.
really not fatigue but like more mid-range strat
Okay,
because
yeah, yeah,
you just have a very hard time basically keeping all your blues away from them, right?
right.
And also if you scroll down, there's something like funny on the sideboarding.
Yeah, I was about to
Yeah,
mention
so
this.
yeah, I took out like one of each of the biggest ones. I guess the
Yeah,
disable could be Thunderquake instead. And I just put
sure,
disable
sure.
because it actually has like disruption text.
Right. Yeah, these are
Um,
the cards that are actually like they play this against you. You're like, man, I really wanted to crack a gold next turn. Man, I'm like dead because I can't block this. And then,
yeah,
man, hey, I want to keep my arsenal. Uh-oh. I get it. These are
yeah,
all the cards that you don't want played against you
yeah.
as the guardian. So
So the reason I took out one of each is so you don't double draw them on a Bonds of Agony turn, pretty much.
that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, so
Yeah.
was this a change that you made after your new game, or was this just kind of your strategy going in?
That was a change I made after a few testing games
Okay,
where I
yeah,
realized, hey, if I draw two of the same name blues on Bonds of Agony turn, I'm really sad.
yeah,
And actually, that did happen in my new game. That's I don't want to say it's why I lost, but it's definitely one of the reasons I lost. Like I had two thunks,
yeah.
and I was like, well, I really like to not block here because I had like a lightning strike and like three blues in hand. I was like, well, I would like to not block here and just send like E strike with I had a few of my tokens up from Castomes.
Mm,
I just go like E strike into hammer and pressure their life a lot, but I was like forced to block there, and it was pretty unfortunate.
yeah. No, I understand. No, I like this a lot. I think there's a lot of value in kind of understanding your role in the matchup, and like the kind of the way the flow of the game will go, to where this does make sense because you're still at 30 blues. You're playing your rousing inches and all that stuff. You're cutting to 60. This is kind of the sweet spot, at least for me. Is you want to play 50% blues, 50% everything else, right? So
Yeah,
having these
Golden
as
Sun's
your
kind
cut
of
cards makes
yeah,
sense.
Golden Sun's kind of a blue with a lot of the two for sixes.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of 2 for 6s. There's also a lot of fives. Not specifically in this matchup, but like in other matchups where you have Golden Sun and a blue, and then you draw like 2 reds, you're still able to cast Spinal. It's still pretty strong.
Yeah.
People make fun of me for playing like Yellow Boulder Drop and testing that card, but it's like basically a blue kind of. It's pretty fun. It's
Yeah,
pretty fun. Okay,
I wish
so
they released the red in that card.
yeah, I
That's probably
know
not going to
everybody
happen.
does. Yeah, but hey, Yellow Boulder Drop is just Red Boulder Drop when you put a Might next to it, and it's been pretty good. But
That's
this
true.
isn't about my list. It's about your list. This matchup, you consider this to be slightly unfavored, really unfavored, more kind of middling. I don't think it's favored,
Yeah.
obviously, but
I'm gonna say what I said for Enigma, and that I think it depends on how the news deck is constructed.
uh,
If they have a lot of tools to prolong the game, I think you're probably more in favored. But I think because of the prevalence of Zen, like I said with Enigma, they're kind of forced to build a deck in such a way that they're just able to continuously convert their hands to like damage and able to continuously disrupt.
mm,
And I think you're better into that as Victor, because even if they like rip one card from you, you can still usually convert a 3 card hand to decent damage. Whereas with Zen, any cards you rip like represents like a decent chunk more damage loss than I'd say
right.
as compared to Victor.
Yeah, we're pretty
So I think
linear, where Zen is
yeah,
more exponential damage creep,
yeah,
right?
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
So
yep.
like I said, like I think how the new decks are constructed, I don't think they're really running like red immovables and stuff, right? Like that's not really popular.
No, no, no.
Um, yeah. So I think they did build their decks like that. If they started running like red immovable and maybe even like Sigil Solace or something to kind of prolong the game, they're just gonna have more and more stuff in banish, and it's just gonna be a bad time for Victor.
Right.
But I think because of how the decks are constructed right now in the meta, and because of how they're forced to construct them to beat other decks,
Mm,
I think it's not as terrible as a matchup as people initially thought it would be. When
sure.
they go, oh no, like Guardian has all these big blues. What am I gonna do into this deck that can play them for free? But
Yeah.
I
So
think it's definitely manageable now.
this is a question for me. So I know there's a lot of contextual dependent situations in the game, but let's say they have a transcend card, or it likely to have a transcend card slash a chi in their hand, and they attack you. First thing they do is the dagger. You blocking it with armor? You not blocking it? Like, let's say you want to keep your whole hand, but you want to make sure that you don't just take like a zillion damage from them transcending and
Yeah.
hitting you for 16 afterwards, right?
Yeah, I would say it depends if I had disruption in my banish or not.
Mm,
Because then you kind of have to think like, how does my turn look like under debilitate, for example? I'd say more often than not, I probably do use armor to block the misplay dagger,
okay.
especially if they have a chi. Just because you kind of like are able to get like you because the blues are still in banish, so they're still able to play them later on, as opposed to if they
Right.
play them and they can't play them later. But because you kind of like give yourself a little more of a life buffer, you're able to attack more effectively, which I think is probably a pretty good use of armor.
Mm,
Um, yeah, I don't think like you're like it's pretty hard to get good armor blocks elsewhere. I think in that matchup, just if we
right.
look at how much value Mistblade gives, if they're gonna double bonk you right with the attacks.
Right. Yeah, there's a
Yeah,
lot of
it's
trickiness to the matchup. I think even
yeah,
LSS, when you click on the hero on the website, it says like it's a tricky hero, right? So I'm still trying to learn
yeah,
this matchup because there are so many different like cogs just going around, So it
yeah.
reminds me
That's
of
very hand
playing.
dependent. Yeah,
Yeah, it reminds me of when I first started learning the game and I played a lot against Dorinthia. And there's a lot of reactions and having to know like it's like you have to know your deck as well as their deck, right? You have to know it all just at equal capacity to be able to have like a really solid chance at winning. But they can build their deck so many different ways. And Siren's Call, I hate that card. The card is so annoying.
yeah.
It's so annoying. But
I think it's actually more of a knowledge check than Dorinthia is, because Dorinthia's buffs
exactly.
are usually like pretty linear for the rates.
Right.
It can be extremely tricky to figure out, because if you just like if they have their armor up and multiple cards in hand, like okay, is it like just the Nick? Is it venomous bite? Is it a hiss?
Right.
I don't
Yeah.
know how much damage is being represented here. It
There's
could be a
so
huge
much.
range, right?
Right. Yeah. They all vary between like plus or minus two. It's like it's nuts. So I asked a local new player like what the math table was, and I'm happy to share that. But it was a wall of text. I was just like, okay,
Oh,
this
yeah.
is a lot. Okay, cool. So
Yeah. Actually, I think I heard a new player say to me, like, one of my favorite things is when I play, Bonds of Agony, and my opponent just sits there for 5 minutes looking at it.
yeah, because you don't know. You just have to
Yeah.
like do all this math, and it's just like most of the time it doesn't even matter because they're just like, oh, you full blocked. Okay, I'm gonna like give it go again with a slither and then do this other thing. And you're just like, ah, all right, fine.
Uh, yeah, I think usually you're not full blocking, that is Victor, because you're just giving
Right,
them a lot of blues in a Banish, and if they play like a Slither, then it gets pretty doomed, right?
right.
At that point,
Yep. I
and it's a pretty
definitely agree.
hand-to-hand.
Yeah, it's definitely contextual, but I just thought I'd pose that question and see get your thoughts. Okay, so slightly unfavored matchup, but it's another skill check style thing. We'll move on, and these are the more like less represented decks until we get to Zen. Prism a little bit more popular nowadays, but you're playing Balance of Justice and Time Skippers. Time Skippers is the panic button, like I'm ALS looped. So let's make sure I don't lose to that, and then Balance of Justice, obviously they're playing tomes. It makes sense to an extent.
Yeah.
I can see an argument for playing the other one as well, just depending on if you're trying to aggro them down. But what's your thought process on this boarding style here? You're cutting Trounce, out muscle, disable, crush the weak, and choke slam.
Yeah.
The Trounce cut makes sense to me because they don't work on the Angels. Like when they attack with their allies, you're not clashing because it's not the defending
Yeah.
hero. Whereas Test of Strength, at least at minimum, is the forward block to be able to cover up that breakpoint, right?
Yeah. So I think into Prism, your plan kind of shifts depending on if they see library early or not.
Sure.
They see library early, you probably have to change to be a bit more aggressive.
Right.
Um, Even though that can be pretty tough sometimes. I think something important to note is like priority of auras to remove, right? Like
Sure.
obviously, Genesis and Merciful, right, are the highest priority ones because those are the ones that fill their soul, right?
Right.
And stuff like passing Mirage is obviously uh pretty important too,
Mm,
but you can still block out the angels, right? Like that's also what
right.
touch strength is for. It's a pretty good break point against like a 7 attack angel if they have a
Exactly.
passing on field and you're forced to swing something else last turn.
Mm,
Yeah, my strategy against them is kind of, take it maybe a bit slower. Try to clear the more important auras. You probably don't care that much about like Pierce Reality, for example.
right.
But yeah. Also you have pretty good on hits. Like Amnesia has a pretty good on hit against them. Because it basically just makes them not do, I'm gonna say not do anything, but it makes it so like their on hits don't really do anything, right?
Right. Yeah. They
The
don't have Herald in their name, so
Heralds?
they don't get a figment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And obviously like weakest link is pretty good. A lot of the time they have a lot of no blocks, so they're pretty
Right.
sad if this hits sometimes.
Right.
And the rest of it is kind of like your it's like standard, I don't know, like standard victor cards. Like Zealous
Mm,
Belting is good because you can go again and clear an aura. Obviously, same thing with each Lion Strike. Go again, clear an aura is very standard playing it into Illusionist as
right.
Guardian.
Right.
And
Yep. And
Spinal is just there because taking away Go again can be quite good sometimes,
yep.
depending if they want to play two Heralds or not. And I think Chokeslam's just there as like it's just like the best read card really, just as the one of. It's pretty good as a
Sure.
follow up to like Zealous Belting.
Sure.
You're just playing it off Tunic, right?
Yeah.
I think you're
Yep.
probably happier to see it than Disable or Crush the Weak usually.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. Yeah, because disable, like a lot of times in these illusionist matchups, they have something in their arsenal. A lot of times it's going to be an instant or a defense reaction. So your disable like literally has no text except being 3 card 9, which is just
Yeah,
barely on rate. Like that's not good stats, right? So it makes sense for this cut. And then spinal they have to respect the one up choke slam just to have your placeholder for the 60, and it's still not a bad card. 2 card 8
yeah, yeah.
is always going to be solid. Cool. So time skippers. Do you think you're going to keep this card in the list for Prism? Do you respect
Oh
Prism
yeah,
that much?
I think it's pretty good against the Prism. It just means it's extremely extremely hard for them to beat time skippers. If you know what you're doing as Victor, if you know how to effectively block, if you know what auras are important to remove,
Mm,
and if they don't really see like library early or their pop up turn early, it just gives them like a really hard time, basically.
Sure. So
Yeah,
in the future, let's look forward a couple of months, and we're in Rosetta, right? Um, you're gonna have to add a null rune,
yeah,
maybe more. Is this a card that you would consider cutting for that reason? Because you know the illusionists are likely to drop down because of the amount of rune chance and whatnot, and arcane damage that's going to be thrown. So the ward and whatnot might decrease. So is this a card that you would still think about continuing to play?
yeah. I would think about cutting time skippers if I thought that was the case.
Okay,
The reason I put it in for this weekend is because I thought Prism was actually a pretty decent pick into
right,
the
yep,
field. So I did decide to bring that as Prism respect.
sure.
Um, I do think that for the null rune slot, like obviously you could take out the time skippers. I wasn't super impressed with out muscle, to be honest.
Okay.
Um, yeah, potentially that could be cut as well,
So this card was a
and
little
maybe some
lacking,
other.
you would say, in this tournament.
Yeah, it's a little bit lacking, I'd say, because another thing with out muscle is into new. If you are blocking, you usually just want to block with reds, not banish anything.
Right,
And you're
and this is
blocking
a
like
two
your
block.
stealth card. Yeah, it's a two block. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
No, that's
Like say for
understandable.
example, if your hands like I don't know, like out muscle, you got like out muscle, blue, and a choke slam,
Mm,
and you have like tunic up. Um, you can't really like out muscle, or if you have like another card in hand, that's another red, for example. You can't really like out muscle and go again into something.
right,
But what you can do is you can like block with two reds and then just like tunic choke slam, but you're only
right,
blocking for two in that case, right?
right. Yep. No, I understand that. And this card, this is one of the first ones that I see myself cutting as well whenever the new meta comes out. So all that makes sense. But yeah, of course, for this meta, I think that this was probably the correct call as well because Prism obviously very strong. A little underrepresented for kind of what we expected, right? But Uh,
Yeah,
very good in the Zen meta currently, I think. That could change in the future, so that's why we're talking about this cut change. But in general, do you with the time skippers, it sounds like you think this matchup is very favored.
yeah, I think it's pretty favored. I know
Okay,
some people like Nullrune. I don't really think you need it.
sure,
I think honestly, probably having the physical armor is pretty good when they have like a passing out, and
right,
you just have to physical block the heralds, right?
yep,
Like sometimes you just have to do that because there's a higher priority target on the field, like
yep.
a Genesis. So
Yeah.
I think you just don't need Nullrune's Prism.
The big difference, right, is like you could play Norrune gloves instead of the gauntlets of Iron Will,
Yeah, yeah,
but
that would be the slot. Yeah,
your strategy instead is when you see a merciful, you're trying to clear that because you were talking about the priorities. Like Genesis obviously is number one, and then merciful it would be like a number two alongside like passing mirage and all that kind of things, right? Um, that makes sense, especially if you're not playing Norrune to be able to prioritize like something like a merciful. Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Okay. Cool. So Prism. So we're going down to Teklo. I imagine this one is not super favored.
No, I don't think it. Yeah, it's not really super favorite because you know they just have their setup plan
Right.
where they kind of fridge you and they set up their big mech.
Right.
But I haven't seen a tech list in a while
I
actually.
haven't either.
But I know
It's
some of
okay.
them are kind of leaning into more of a hybrid plan just
Right.
to be able to compete with some other decks.
Right.
So I think as a result of that, they're not running um like as many cards that can actually block you out effectively because they're all more hybrid. They have to be boosting awake, right?
Sure. Yep.
But I do think with this list, like it's probably not as bad as before because if you just keep winning your clashes and stack Castomes, I think you can just like beat them that way. But I haven't actually played against a Teklo with this list, so I'm not sure 100%.
Yeah. I haven't played against a Tekla in
Yeah,
a while either, but my inherent plan would be, use your block cards, do your thing as much as you can. They're stacking their armor pieces out, but if you can get big enough cast homes and prioritize putting that with a golden sun and maybe even a pummel, all of their armor pieces are actions. So they can't block your golden sun with the armor, right?
Yeah,
So if
exactly.
you can stack it up to like a 20 power Golden Sun, which is not unrealistic, by the way, um, it's not
No,
a
I've
terrible
done that
game
before.
plan.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah,
So I'm just saying that for the viewers, right? Um, but that is that's a solid strat. It's better than it was, is all I'm saying. Like once this card came out, a lot of matchups got way better. So
yeah.
okay, so
But
yeah,
I also don't think you need a Nothos, like I said, for this matchup.
no,
Because
mm,
if you just look at the shield, it just
yep,
represents like 3 damage with the cast domes and
right,
3 block, which is pretty good. And you also just like it's not completely unlikely that you're gonna have to reroll against Teklo maybe, like if you get a miss or something, right?
sure. It's
Yeah. So I think
it's
just
not
looking at the
super
shield
likely,
is
but it
pretty good.
definitely can for sure. They play a lot of sixes in their list, right?
Yeah, they do play
But
a lot of sixes. Yeah.
the majority of our deck is going to be a little bit higher than that. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, you don't have to sell me on this card. I love this card. Super good. Cool. So
Yeah.
would you say this is slightly unfavored? I don't know the exact answer just yet.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'm going to say probably 50-50 to be safe.
Yeah. I think that's probably a conservative estimate. I think
Yeah,
it depends a lot on how the Teklo deck is built.
sure. That's also
Um.
fair.
Yeah. I think if it's more of a fridge style, it can probably be a bit rougher, but it's probably not that bad if you have to try to erase them now with there's so much might value with cast domes and just you're stacking a bunch of gold, right?
Right.
So yeah, we'll
Yep.
see. But I also
Yep.
think like mech's not super good right now, anyways.
Yeah. Dash is okay, but the rest of them are kind of middling. Um, let's see. So next we got our Rune Blades. You're not playing any AB, right? Um,
Yeah.
how do you
Uh.
feel about Viscerai?
Yeah.
I feel like Viscerai would probably be a little hard.
Yeah. Viscera is pretty hard. They just. I mean, if they're on Looming Doom, they just start like stacking the rune chance, and you can't really like flash them, right?
Right.
It's not like other decks where they're kind of forced to. It's not like Max where they're forced to actually attack you to set up. They
Right.
can just sit there and start catching your own chance, right?
Right. Yeah.
But I think it's the more aggro decks. If you did have AB, you'd probably be like fine to aggro Viscerai,
Uh,
just because you have so much disruption, right?
right. Yep. I definitely agree. If they're on OTK build, they're losing every other matchup, but they beat us, whether we're on a bunch of
Yeah,
Olrin
yeah,
or not. But if they're on the kind of mid-rangey one, or I guess aggro is probably the better way to look at it, with they might even be playing Crown and Dominion on their own and cash in, just trying to like capitalize on that. That matchup, even with AB, can be a little bit more difficult, but being able to play Test of Strength and Trounce in that makes a difference. So the way I've been boarding lately is basically exactly the way you have it here, where it's a little bit hedging towards both, right? But I have one AB personally. But yeah, I mean, like this solid strategy. Majority of Viscerais are not
yeah,
going to try to OTK you unless they're just trolling on Talishar or something. But yeah,
yeah. I agree. I guess
yeah,
there might be an argument for running the second amnesia over something else, something other red, because I do
sure,
believe some of their cards name rune chance, right? Quite a few.
I believe so. Yeah, like
Yeah,
any of them that reduce cost for the number of rune chance.
yeah,
Yeah, it is good for that as well. Um, like maybe cut a trounce for an amnesia, and then you're hedged a little bit more or something. I don't know.
yeah,
There's many ways to build this, but all the blues, um, being able to consistently like play your hands out is pretty important. So I do tend to agree with this style. There's no zero cost in their deck, right? Or like no blocks, so this card doesn't really have text, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So
Well, it'd probably be over like disable, I guess, or something.
sure,
That's like
sure.
a small change. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay. So Vincent, I think you were referencing Vincent and saying that you actually can just kind of out disruption them even without the AB, right?
yeah. I wasn't expecting to play against an even set, but I
Sure.
think if you do have AB, it's extremely favored. It's probably not an auto loss if you don't have AB, just because you can kind of you have enough like disruptive reds that they do have to respect it,
Right.
and they do kind of have to block, right? And obviously, amnesia is also very annoying for them.
Yeah.
uh,
Because of
that
rune
part's
gate
pretty
and
good.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yep. Yeah, there's a
Uh,
lot of utility here for that. So yeah, very favored with null rune. Without null rune, uh, would you say it's a little unfavored? Maybe just like 50-50 because the hero has to banish a card from their hand every turn and can't play with a one card hand.
yeah, I'd say it's probably in favor. Yeah, at that point.
Okay, yeah, just a little unfavored, but still winnable, which is crazy to think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's just because of like the disruption cards I'm running with Amnesia, for example.
right.
Yeah,
Yep, no, makes sense. Okay. So we are almost at the home front here. So we got the Warriors.
yeah,
Warriors have been traditionally a pretty decent matchup for Victor as of late because of the block cards being able to have all the extra stuff. You got your Goldman Estates that are able to push some of this. And your disruption is actually relevant in a lot of cases. Like obviously Spinal's good, Command and Conquer strong. They want to play a bunch of defense reaction style things, right? So
yeah,
lots of utility. The outs to me makes sense. I've played out muscle against warriors in the past because of course they don't really play attacks, so it's like decent there. Um, so
yeah.
what's your thought process on this? You're just trying to mid range, maybe? You know, like just maximize turn cycle math.
Yeah, it's basically just maximize turn cycle math. I
Okay.
think the reason I cut out muscle is because sometimes you do just want to block them, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
not like Enigma where not like Enigma, I should say. It's not like new. Because I don't play muscle into Enigma. It's not like new where you're super punished for prolonging the game.
Mm,
Like in this case, if you're prolonging the game, Kasai might be able to like stack gold potentially, but you also can stack golds, right?
right. Yep.
And you just have physical main state to hit them with like a million might tokens. That's pretty good. So yeah, I think the sideboard is quite nice into a lot of warrior lists. You're just winning
Mm,
your clashes, getting a ton of gold, getting a ton of mites. And another thing I do like is Snapdragon Scalers. 'Cause obviously, Civic Steps is one of the card like Quicken is pretty good for them to have.
right.
Um,
Yep.
yeah, it can be quite punishing. So this just being 2 damage is quite good, I think, just to be able to pressure their life a bit more.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
In the
So I
previous
think
meta, there was a lot of
yeah,
dual wield. So giving them a quicken token actually could be a big deal. Like dual wield Dorinthia. Josh top aided with that, with the hatchets, right? So blocking poorly with your civic steps actually means that you get to let them swing 3 times, and that's a disaster. Like you don't want that to happen.
yeah,
So no, that makes
yeah,
sense
I
with
agree
the
with you. Yeah.
snaps. Just trying to like capitalize off of the value here. I like the flexibility of E-Strike in general when you have a Snapdragon Scalers because you can play your normal game plan of 5 go again or 2 card 7, right? Like those are still strong. But then if there is a situation where you're just like, oh, I don't have an arsenal, let me draw a card, see what happens. Oh, it's a blue. Okay, crack snaps, send in 4. Oh, it's a red. I'm just gonna arsenal. You can save your snaps for the next one, right? The
Yeah.
utility is
Like
really
one of the
cool.
plays that's like extremely strong is you like E-strike for 7 snaps
Right,
and you use like Tunic into Chokeslam, or you send like CNC and then Tunic into Pummel, for example. And those are the
right.
kinds of swing turns that can basically really swing the game in your favor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, just I kind of glossed over that as well. Like the 0 for 7 crack snaps and then just come in with another attack. Like that's big damage. Like 7 into some
Yeah,
other 8 or whatever, or even the 4. Like it's still 11, which is amazing. Like that's the same
yeah,
stats as doing a Rousey Ancients, but with a little less work because you have the Snapdragon Scalers that start out, right?
yeah.
No,
So
that's cool.
I am quite happy with Snapdragon Skillers. I think a lot of people kind of underrate that in Guardian. They kind of laugh at it. They're like, haha, you don't really have any. It's not like it's not like too great. But I do think it's yeah.
Sorry, you cut out just a little bit. You said you don't think it's
Oh,
too great,
sorry.
but it's probably worth it. Is
No, I said a
kind of
lot of
where you went.
people don't think it's too great,
Yeah,
but I think it's yeah, I think it's definitely worth a slot with Lightning Strike, especially into New and Enigma,
yeah,
and as a side effect, into Warrior too, it's pretty good.
yep, yeah, for sure. There's a lot of like even against the mechs, I like this a lot too. It's like one of my favorite
Yeah,
cards to play because of the just the T-bone shenanigans that you can do with it and press the advantage a little bit. Um, even though it's only 3 cards in your deck, you do have to be a little conscious with that. Like if you got to make sure you use it at like a decent time. So I try to do it like pretty early, if at all possible, because there are
Yeah.
sometimes you just don't get to use it, right? If you're not careful.
I,
But
I had a pretty funny testing game
mm.
where my new opponent bonds are bagging me, and they got all my Easter eggs, and then Snaps was just textless.
Yeah, that's fair.
Uh,
That's actually a
yeah,
pretty big brain play for the new. That's funny. You just
yeah,
like invalidate your entire boot slot. Nice. Okay, so
yeah,
Warrior, decently favored at this point. I would probably say. Would you tend to agree?
yeah. I would say that as well. Yeah,
Okay. And then lastly, the big deck in the format is Zen.
yeah,
Okay, so everybody's teching for this deck. Everybody knows, and I had to imagine that all of these cards being in the sideboard are there for a reason because every card in this deck is something that is relevant into Zen. Makes sense. That's the way I
yeah,
build my decks. You know, you tackle your big deck, and then you supplement for the rest of the meta, right? So all of this makes sense to me. Balance of Justice. They're playing Art of War, Civic Steps. They have a bunch of Go Again. Who cares? It's 3 block, right? Aurum Aegis because it's more block and you're going to be winning every single one of these test of strength and trounces. So actually having the other hat doesn't really matter, right? So a
yeah,
lot of times you're going to see these before you see your visit. And if you do see the visit early, you can always arsenal it. This is one of the best blues to arsenal in the first place. So, but yeah, Clash of Might, I imagine, was very good for this matchup. And again, this is like one of your main considerations. They're playing this over something like the Boulder Drop.
like, obviously, you're very likely to win Clash in this matchup.
Mm,
So if you're playing Clash of Might and you're presenting 7 attack breakpoints with like Command and Conquer, Amnesia, Weakest Link,
right,
it makes them very sad because they're basically forced to give you their fridge at that point. And as
right.
soon as the Zen gives you their fridge, it's kind of like they're probably going to have a big swing back to ensure. But if you can survive that, even from a pretty big life deficit, you just present like disruption after disruption after disruption. Eventually, you're probably going to get there just because
Mm,
their small card hands don't convert very well.
right.
And you just keep up the pressure eventually. Um, you're just going to get them to the point where they have to full block, right?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, that's kind of been my experience as well. Again, I haven't been playing the Clash of Might as of late. I'm definitely going to try this now, with the newer iteration of the deck. But yeah, a lot of times as you're disrupting, you're doing your clashes, and then they have the big swingback turn with their 7 card hand. Just they go bananas. They usually Art of War you, and you say, okay, balance, draw a card. So that's the mitigation there, and then you'll take like 20 damage, sure, for sure.
Yeah.
But then you just send something back. They have to give you more cards because they have no armor, and then their damage is middling whenever they only play with like 2 to 3 cards in their hand, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the strategy that has been successful for me, and it sounds like the kind of what you're implementing as well. But even a little bit better than what I've been doing because you have the more might generation for all of these cards that are extremely relevant at these breakpoints.
Yeah. I will say something. I think you have to be like a little bit careful with use civic steps because you
Mm,
can unintentionally give them pretty good value on go again. Like if
sure,
they send
sure.
like for example on a small card hand, if you just block at the end of their chain and they send like the 1 for 5 into CNT for example off of blue.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I think most cases it's pretty easy to just get full 3 value from it without giving them anything. We're just a little bit conscientious about when you do it.
Right. Yeah, I usually do it in the middle of the chain when I know their next thing,
Yeah,
like something like the Descendant, and
yeah,
you know
that's
it's
the
going to
best
be a
part. Yeah,
bonds,
that's
right?
the best
Like
time. Yeah,
it's just super easy. Yeah, this is one of the easier ones. So like if you're trying to learn civic steps, play against some Zens, and you'll probably not mess up. And then when you do mess up and they E-strike draw a card, then you know, okay, fine. So
yeah. Like I have seen sometimes people just like save it for the end, and they end up actually regretting it because they don't really have like a clean way to actually full block with it. So I think you
exactly.
just cash it in when you know they're gonna have go again
Right.
on the next attack, anyways.
Yeah, I try to make sure that they do play a little bit more on hits nowadays, especially with the bands. So it's not like something I immediately
Yeah,
just shove, but it will be mid game. If I still have counters on my civic steps late game, then I know I probably misstep somewhere. Right.
yeah. No, I agree with you. It's not. I think it's something you're not. you're not really looking to have at the very like you don't want to have no counters on at the very end of the game, right? But you want to make
Right.
sure you convert it. But yeah,
Right.
usually mid game is correct. Yeah,
Yep. Cool. Good deal. So, obviously the deck was built to beat Sin, so this is a favorite matchup. That
yeah,
is it. That's all of the matchups. I know we are missing just a couple, but we're not really going to be talking about those anyway. They don't really show up a whole lot. So the other ones are like Arachne and Riptide and whatnot. The only question I have for those is, would you play more cards than 60 into those decks?
into Arachne, I'd probably go over 60.
Mm,
Um, I think into Arachne, your plan's probably just gonna be to do the big physical main states and go over whatever they can block. But obviously, it's a
sure.
very favorite matchup. Um, I haven't thought about how much over 60 I'd go, but I probably wouldn't go so much over to the extent that you're messing up your blue ratios. So you don't have playable hands anymore, right?
Right.
That can be
Right.
a problem. Into Riptide, Riptide's also very favorite. I don't think you have to think too much about it. You probably just take out like your Zealous spell things, out muscles, and you
Mm,
can probably just shove everything else honestly and be happy with that.
sure. So against Arachne, do you play Crown of Dominion and
Yeah.
get Regicided?
No, I probably wouldn't do that.
Okay.
I mean, yeah.
It's a
Like if
threat,
the Arachne,
technically.
yeah. No, if the Arachne like knows you're playing, like if the Arachne sees, oh my victor opponent, um, I don't know. Are they playing? I haven't seen an Arachne list in
They're
so
probably
long.
not playing it. I'm just,
Yeah, they're
throwing
probably not playing
spitballs at
Regicide,
you.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know they used to play when Dromai was still a thing, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah, like maybe okay. Honestly, it might be something they do cyber right now just for Victor. They'd be like, hey, my Victor opponent, they could be on Crown of Dominion. I might as well just play this one card.
Yeah, sure.
I
And
don't
then
know.
you like pitch stack
Yeah,
it
so
to late game, and then there's no way you can block it. So
yeah,
just something to think
yeah.
about.
But I'd probably just not go the. I'd probably not play Crown of Dominion because I think that's probably one of the only ways you can lose this matchup consistently, right?
Right.
Into Arachne.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. Obviously, like Riptide and Arachne are very favorite matchups in as a Guardian.
Sure. Yep. All that makes sense to me. Okay. So we have gone over all of the matchups, and I agree wholeheartedly. And we're going to transition all the way to the end almost. So tell us what strategy beats Victor. Now, you don't have to say specific decks unless you want to. We know the bad matchups, we kind of went over those, but like if somebody is having a hard time playing against Victor, how best would they approach to be able to beat Victor in their local metas or something like that, right?
Yeah, I'd say probably the way you can beat Victor is probably the traditional way you beat Guardians is maybe don't be afraid to take off turns to set up. Like
Mm-hmm.
obviously,
Yeah.
Victor's running a lot of Clash cards that don't convert well if you don't attack them, right?
Right.
So maybe if you have a choice where you're choosing between like blocking 9 or like blocking 6 and sending 4, for example, maybe just choose to block 9. Because
Mm-hmm.
even though you're setting yourself up for a bit more of a fatigue angle, I feel like in this meta, there's definitely less games going to fatigue. And if you're able to set up a taller turn they can block, then you're probably going to be in a pretty good spot. And also, if you force them to keep, like, if you force them to IP penalty basically with Clash cards, you're also probably going to be pretty happy with that.
Right. Yeah,
So that would
that's
be my
definitely
advice
something
here,
that's
Victor.
annoying for me is having
Yeah,
block cards they don't attack, and I just have like two clash cards, and I'm just like, oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's
And
fair.
also, if they have civic steps, I guess try to put them in tricky spots for civic steps where you
Mm-hmm.
can be quick and value. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. Like if you have an E-Strike in hand and you're playing a Gogan attack anyway, and they're okay, I'm gonna block with the civic steps, and then you're like, okay, E-Strike, draw a card. You just get like instantaneous.
yeah,
That's one card five with Gogan. It's nuts. It's
yeah.
nuts.
Like, I know some Zen decks can punish that with like E strike, for example. Like
Yep.
if they have E strike,
Mm.
if your victor does a bad civic steps block, they can get really good value out of that card.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm talking about. Specifically that matchup I've seen where that can be a little bit annoying. Okay, so don't be afraid to do some setup turns. Maybe play a deck that is already inherently favored against Victor. But if you're trying to, play a 50-50 style matchup and you're trying to like get that edge, doing some setup turns like that. That makes a lot of sense, and I agree. Okay, well, that's basically it. Do you have any closing thoughts besides me telling you congratulations and, hope to see you at Pro Tour and cheer you on?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to say thank you to my testing teams who I test with.
Mm,
Big shout out again to Mark Boothroyd, Frank Boothroyd, and Nicola Marco for helping me a lot with this list and essentially staying up until uh, like 12:30 the day of nationals
yeah,
and in a
yeah.
call with me, help me figure out this list. Um, I guess also thank. Am I allowed to show sponsors or no?
Sure, why not?
Oh yeah, yeah. Thank you to Invasion. For sponsoring me. Those guys are the story is really great. A lot of good people there, and
Cool.
good craft community. And I guess thank you to the GTA overall for just having a great fab community. And everyone is really inclusive and supportive of everyone. It's really great to see. And it's probably the biggest reason I played this game is for the community.
Yep, yep. Very well put. I'm the same way. I love all the people I interact with on the regular basis and all the people I don't interact with on a regular basis. Community is great. But are you going to be playing Pro Tour?
I'm not going to Pro Tour Amsterdam, but I'm probably going to Worlds. So
Yeah,
actually
yeah.
for the Pro Tour, I got second twice, and one of those losses was actually to Sunny, the person who knocked me
Nice,
out in,
nice.
in nationals. Yeah, so I top eighted I think 4 times and lost that second twice. Um,
Yeah, fair enough.
yeah,
Fair enough.
honestly, it's like a pretty busy month for me, life wise. So I probably wouldn't have been able to go anyways. But
Sure.
yeah, I'm probably gonna try to make Worlds work. So I'm pretty excited for that. And I'm probably also gonna go to Rosetta pre-release, not pre-release, world premiere.
Yeah, I'll
That's
see you
probably gonna
there.
be a
I'll
great
see you there.
tournament for sure. Yeah,
That'll be good. Cool. Well, we'll have to get some dinner whenever you're down there, and then hopefully I see you in Osaka too. But best of luck in all your future endeavors, and hopefully life
thank you.
isn't too busy for you. But yeah, I appreciate you coming on to the channel and showing off this very amazing Victor deck. I love playing this guy, and you showing people that they can love playing him too. And Guardian isn't as boring as it used to be, where it's just all block and swing hammer, right?
Yeah,
So
but you can do some really big brain lines with the gold.
yeah, 100%. There's so
Yeah,
many times where it's just like, okay, I got to crack this. Like, I need to set up an arsenal. So cracking the gold and then sending a command and conquer because I have extra floating. There's so many cool lines that you can make with the gold and the victor and the added card advantage engine that is just inherent within his suite of just you know cards in general. There's so much card advantage in this Victor deck that kind of draws me to playing him more and more. And I play him all the time just on Talishar, just for fun. So, well, is there some place that people could find you? Maybe Twitter that you want to shout out your Twitter handle and they can give you some follows?
yeah. My Twitter handle is Metal Sonnets.
Okay.
Um, you,
Yeah.
I'm
And
not
we'll
sure if
post this in the
yeah, I
description
don't think
as
my account's
well.
too popular. Yeah, yeah. My Discord name is Metal. I'm on the Purple Discord, so if anyone ever wants to talk to me, you can just send me a DM there.
Sweet.
Yeah, I'm pretty approachable, I think. Yeah,
That's awesome. I agree. I agree. We've talked many times online for sure. So, again, thank you and wish you the best of luck. And we will see you guys next time. Appreciate all the sponsors to allow us to do all these great and wonderful things. Dragon Shield for all your best card protection needs and deck boxes and all those things. And then Fabric.gg for all your ratio needs, right? And Magnolia Gaming, where you can get pre-orders on Rosetta right now. Go do it right in the description below. Well, we'll see you guys. And again, thank you, Michael. And we'll talk to you guys later. Bye.